Hello, this is Jimbo from the YouTube channel Jimbo, South Dakota, and this is the Hog House Chronicles podcast. And I am sitting here in Illinois with a couple friends, Cat and Mark Wiley. They are both retired chiefs out of the Air Force and continuing on with their lives here in the beautiful home that he's been showing me today. And so we're just going to jump right in. And Cat, I know you got a fairly large family.
I do. Thank you, Jim. This is a fun opportunity. Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Yes, I do. I grew up in a family of 7 kids. I am a Texas girl, but my dad was my real dad is Army, and then my mom remarried when I was about 2 to an Air Force guy. So no matter what, we were always somewhere around the military ever since I was born. Had 7 of us. Did a lot of our military travels overseas. So I went to Landstuhl Elementary. Did my elementary there in Landstuhl, Germany, and Ramstein area, and then I went to high school in Torrejon, Spain. So I went to a lot of my schooling through the Dodd school system, which was super fun and exciting. Loved that. But there was 7 of us, so I'm the oldest of the 7. There's 5 girls and 2 boys. So there's 3. 7 of us. Let's see. So just traveled all over the world. Enjoyed the military lifestyle. That was something that I enjoyed. Went to 4 different high schools all throughout in my high school career. So I often hear parents talk about and lament about how hard it is for kids to change schools. And it was hard, definitely. But I mean, I've got friends all over the world and experiences that, I don't think a lot of young folks get a chance to do.
Yeah, it's good that you appreciate that.
Yeah.
Because that can be difficult for people to understand.
Yeah, it is. It's just a unique experience. And, oftentimes we'll head home to Mark's hometown and, the folks that he grew up with have been in that hometown for almost their entire lives, if not their entire lives. And so it's just this different experience to have. And I really enjoyed it. I'm sure as a teenager, if you would have asked me if that was the greatest experience in the world, I probably would have not said it was the greatest experience. But I did enjoy it. I love living in Spain. I love learning about different cultures, being exposed to that. I think it's really helped me, one, in being in a big family, but also just in my life as I've been able to adjust to change pretty easily, be accepting of things that are maybe outside my comfort zone a little bit, trying to learn a language, be in Spain where you know nothing and, traverse the metro or do any of those, things that you want to kind of do as a young person. Was a little intimidating, a little scary, but I always felt like I was always outside of my comfort zone. And I'm kind of a little bit of an introvert, just like a little one. So super, super introverted. And it actually wasn't until my military career that I started to try to figure out how to kind of adjust that a little bit, because it was just a big adjustment for me.
So did you know you were going to go in the military from
no
14 years old?
No.
Or how old were you when you went in, and how did you decide to do that?
I don't know really when I decided. I know I liked the military lifestyle. I liked moving around. We got to see a lot. So I knew I enjoyed that. I think I decided to really join probably in my high school years when I was in Spain. So I wouldn't say maybe as a sophomore, maybe a junior. I kind of thought this is something that I would really like to do. I'd really like to kind of travel the world and continue. It also felt very secure everywhere we went in the military. There was a military family. There was something, you felt very taken care of. There was always, the commissary, the BX. I mean, you had youth center. You just always had your military family. And we were always so connected. Even when I joined a school, when I would come back to the States for a year and go to school, those kids had known each other since kindergarten, and trying to break into that. But when you go to a military school, everybody is in the same boat. And so you all bond almost instantly. Everyone, differences don't seem to matter as much. You just really kind of connect on a different level. And I really enjoyed that. So I think about my junior year, I decided that was kind of the culture that I liked and I wanted to be a part of. And then my dad, being, of course, Air Force, was, eager to sign me up. So he was ready for one of us to follow in his footsteps.
Was he an officer or enlisted?
He was officer. He was a communications officer. So he worked a lot on radars and would always spend time up in the mountains and doing that kind of communications, which now I'm not really sure what that AFSC would have been, but it was always up in the mountains and kind of working on the equipment more so than, kind of a desk job. I don't think he was always up in the big snow cats and stuff. So
he did enlist you, right?
he did. Yes, he did. So
Very cool.
yeah. So I was right when I graduated out of Albuquerque, New Mexico, is where I finally ended up graduating. I went there for about 8 months before graduation, and then he enlisted me there. I wanted to come in as something medical that, that was kind of I don't know, it was, well, I can do that. That's something I can do. It would help me afterwards. And my dad was like, oh, let me school you up on how this all works and how to do this. But him being an officer, and I really didn't want to wait for college. I wanted to just go ahead and get what I felt like was getting my life started. So I went ahead and decided to go enlisted, and I tried to get a guaranteed job. I was looking at all the medical things. They wouldn't guarantee me anything. My dad was able to call up somebody, and they were able to kind of get me into the dental career field. And so I started out dental, did dental for probably 7 years. But he was able to get me that guaranteed, which was kind of, I just thought it was the greatest thing. I was really excited about,
Nice.
about having that option. And it was something that I felt like I could do. I was interested in, and I really wanted to do it. So that was a big bonus and a big pull for
Well,
me.
it's something like you said. It's there can be a lot of career fields where out in the civilian world it doesn't do you a lot of good. So I can definitely
Right.
see you using that.
Oh yeah, that was a big concern for me.
Yeah,
I'm familiar with one.
yeah.
What?
I'm familiar with one.
Yeah,
Yep.
a career field that doesn't necessarily easily translate, but yeah, and I do like working with people, and that was just something that I think kind of really fit to my likes and my dislikes. So I thought it was going to be a great adjustment for me, and it was. I enjoyed it. My first assignment, of course, was you join to see the world. And my first assignment, they sent me back to Hill Air Force Base, which was right where my family was stationed and where everybody was. Because we had been stationed there as a family like 2 or 3 times. My parents had bought a house there. And so when I enlisted, we were at New Mexico at the time, but when I enlisted, my first assignment was Hill Air Force Base. And I was like, what? I've been there like 4 times. Like, why are you sending me here? I found out, or someone told me that it was because my social, the 528 or whatever was somehow a part of that decision, which I don't know. That might have been a
Yeah,
fallacy.
I think that whole system's a big mystery.
it is
Anyway,
kind of a mystery for sure. Yeah.
So, Mark, how about you? Where'd you grow up, and what would you like to tell us about that?
I grew up in Hagerstown, Maryland, and my reasonings and completely opposite. So I know what a hometown is. I grew up in the same house for 18 years. I didn't really have an interest in college because nobody really ever talked to me about going to college. Nobody in my family ever went to college. And I didn't really like school. Wasn't necessarily bad at it, but I didn't really apply myself either. And I just felt like if I went to college, I had to pay for it. Went to junior college, kind of felt like the 13th grade. Buddy of mine, Bill Gorsuch, went to the recruiter one day, and he's like, hey, man, I'm going down to see the Air Force recruiter. You want to go? And I was like, yeah, it sounds kind of cool. Sounds different. Nobody else was doing it, And I didn't have to go to school. I was going to get paid instantly, and I was like, well, uniforms are better than the Navy. Doesn't seem as harm as the Marine. So I went and saw the recruiter, and the recruiter did his job, and next thing you know, I come home and tell my parents, I think about joining the Air Force. My mom's like, what? No, we go to war. I'm like, come on, Mom, we ain't had a war since Vietnam. 3 months later, we invade Panama.
Where in the country did you grow up?
In Hagerstown, Maryland.
Maryland. Okay.
And so I did delayed enlistment, so I kind of felt kind of good that I knew what I was going to do. Didn't know about guaranteed job. My dad was an Air Force officer. Nobody in my family had everything military, so I was at the complete disposal of the recruiter. No, you should go in open general. You'll get that way you get to pick your job when you get there.
How exciting.
And so I really thought I was going to be a cop. I wanted to be a cop. Do my 4 years and go back home and be a cop. Best decision never happened. I did open general. I looked at the different career fields. Things seemed different. And 30 some years ago now, I can't really remember, but I know a cop was a choice, but I didn't get it. So I guess the good Lord was looking out, and I got air crew life support, and off to Chanute I went, which is ironically 3-4 hours north of where we live now. And you know, I spent my whole career, I didn't do anything 30 years outside the career field. You know, I did jobs, as you know, and you know, I did an instructor within the job. I was on an inspection team within the job, but I never left to do anything else in 30 years. And I don't know, you know, before I made Master Sergeant, I was on the you must cross train out. So if I wouldn't have made Master Sergeant when I made it, I would have been forced to go do something else. Unfortunately, timing's everything, as you know. And I made Master Sergeant, and that got me off the list and allowed me to continue to do that. But yeah, that's that was primarily, there was nothing else that I was really interested doing to where I felt like losing everything that I had worked for to that decision point.
Right. Yeah, you went in through our talking earlier today. When you went in about 4 years after I did, so we had both gone to Chanute. That's closed up.
Yeah.
Now, and Kat's got some things she needs to do a little bit later, so she's going to end up leaving us. But I think Mark and I will end up continuing on here. But we're going to go for a while yet.
Yeah.
So you both were about halfway through your careers when you met.
We were, yes. So I think I was staff sergeant. I was doing my first remote tour. So I was stationed at McCord and got in a remote assignment out of McCord from there. And I was also in the middle of, I had just retrained from dental into paralegal. And so that transition, McCord was my first transition. And so this was an opportunity to do a deployment to Korea. So I went to Osan for a year. And, you know, that's definitely a very serious and studious place where you get your degree and spend a lot of time increasing your intellect.
But you had two career fields you could use outside the Air Force.
I did.
Yeah.
I had
Look at
two.
that.
See, I was
two more than I had.
stocking up my repertoire there for sure. But yeah, so we were hanging out with friends, and we were down at a dance club, and he was hitting on my friend. And
Really?
yeah, it was.
Did we talk about this
Never
earlier,
been
Mark?
true. She tells it the same. Never been true.
It's so true.
He didn't use the term hitting on, at least. He just said talking to.
I don't think her
He
friend
said
was
she's
wearing
going to
leather
say I
pants.
was talking to this other girl first. And bam.
And there
That
you
just
go.
happened.
He knows the
Yeah,
story.
I don't think her friends were wearing leather pants. I'm just saying.
Oh, well, yeah. So we were dancing. So we met there at the dance club, and he was talking to one of my friends and there at the table, and I just sat down and joined him, and I think we were joined at the hip ever since. I don't know. What's your version?
That, except leather pants. But no, I was actually talking to Jimbo earlier, and it was when we started talking, and clearly we're in Korea, and you're not Korean, so I'm like, well, obviously, where do you work? Oh, paralegal. And I was like, oh, you work with that crazy major
Yeah.
that I fit up for a backseat ride in the F-16, and that's how we started talking.
Mm-hmm.
And then,
And if she's listening, I defended her and did not say that she was crazy.
I mean, crazy isn't cool.
Yeah.
Most major
She was very, very
attorneys-
cool. She was very cool.
Most major attorneys that I met weren't
Yeah.
cool like she was cool. That was-
She was pretty cool.
But yeah, so that was kind of the conversation starter.
Mm-hmm.
And then she busted some dance moves on, and the rest is history.
Yeah, cannot dance to this day, but it was fun. But yeah, and then I think it wasn't a couple of weeks later, I think that crazy boss, crazy attorney had gotten an incentive ride. And so in all of her luster and fluster of doing that and trying not to throw up, no.
The ride was before that. That's how we got to talking. That's how I knew you work with that crazy major. Was she's the crazy major, and that's how I started talking, because one of my guys left, or she left all of her stuff.
She
on
left
the
all
flight
of her
line.
ID, and he came into the office and was bringing it back. And
So
like, oh, that's that cute guy.
it's still not right.
So did you guys just like hit it off and just went from there, or was there like some transitions in and out kind of?
No, like I didn't, it's kind of one of those things, talking talking to her there, it's kind of like everybody else disappeared, you know. And I did not. That was my second time going to Korea, and I just left Aviano for 2 years
Had to come
in
back and get
Italy,
me.
and I was not looking to go to Korea to find a wife. But you know, we hit it off very well. I would see her through the week. We went, I don't know, within a week or so, went on our first date to Happy Teriyaki.
Happy teriyaki. Yes,
what I got.
still there. I
Sorry,
highly
I got-
recommend it.
I got coordinates on my 30-year tattoo of our first date.
There you
But
go.
we went to Happy Teriyaki, and we just hit it off and felt like spending time together. And that was
3 months into it.
March, April, somewhere. I mean, I got there, I think, in April, and yeah, we were, except Friday nights, I would go out on the town with the softball team, but eventually we'd meet up, and Saturdays and Sundays we'd hang out, and through the week it was just constant. And I think we were talking a little bit about it earlier. I didn't, you know, we spent most of our time together in a dorm room that's not even as big as the room I'm in right now, and to spend 6, 7, 8 months together in that close, confined quarters without even a hint of an argument, you know, it was kind of different. You know, it was somebody that there's something that I wanted to do, somebody I wanted to spend time with, not like I was forced to. It just felt natural.
Yeah, and part of why I asked that question is because just the deal of both of you being in active duty, and you know, if you're going to have kids later, and you know, maintaining a household even without kids when you're married, with each of you traveling sometimes the same time, sometimes not, but then adding a child into the mix as well.
Yeah.
So I think it adds a dynamic to the marriage question,
Sure.
both being active duty.
Yeah. And then also the question of whether or not we can be stationed together.
Yep.
You know, his career field, my career field. Luckily, we both had career fields that were pretty much generally at almost every base. We had a lot of options, where a lot of folks, you know, sometimes don't have that based on airframe or whatever. They can't go somewhere. But I think that was one of the big things, like, where would we be able to be together? But I don't think we really decided at that point in Korea that, you know, there was like the marriage question or anything. I think we were both like, Korea, you don't meet your future person in Korea. We're just like, that can't be real. So we just kind of, once he left before me, a couple months before me,
You left before me.
I left before him.
See, memory.
Maybe you should tell the story.
No, well, it goes back to neither one of us went to Korea looking for a spouse,
Right.
And I think we both went into it with, we are going to be absolutely ourselves. I tell her all the time, hey, you met me at my best in Korea, and you said yes. So, like,
What do you
congratulations.
expect?
But no, because we weren't looking for it, we were able to be ourselves, and we weren't making up things to have a relationship. It was, we met, we enjoyed spending time together, and we weren't looking for a relationship, so we had no pressure to be something other than who we were. And I figured that if you're willing to hang out with me and I'm at my best, like,
Yeah, I
this is a bonus for me.
I did follow him around to the softball team, you know, every time they'd go play, and they would travel a lot to go play tournaments and stuff. And
And I defended you because everybody thought you were Russian.
they all thought I was a Russian girl. How'd you get her on base? You know, it's like, I don't even look Russian. I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we just were able to be ourselves and hang out, and we really enjoyed it. And then we got back to the States.
We both had already had an assignment.
Yep.
I had an assignment back to Dover, and she had an assignment back to Langley, which fortunately, geographically, was close enough to where we could at least see each other on the weekends.
I think you need to elaborate on the Russian girl thing. I think they're all wondering what
So-
that was about.
So when I went to Korea the first time, most of the girls downtown that were at the bar girls, otherwise known as Juicy Girls, were typically mostly Filipino or Korean. I left in 2 years. I went to Italy, and I come back, and about 70% of the girls downtown were then Russian. And so with us first meeting, I played a lot of softball over there, and she came up to a tournament up to Yongsan when we were playing this tournament, and a couple of the guys that were on the team that hadn't met her because they were on their mid-tour, I had talking to her, you know, in between innings or the game or whatever, and they come over to me and they're like, hey, dude, who's that Russian girl? How'd you get her on base? I'm like, she's not Russian. Dude, seriously, I'm not going to tell anybody. I'm like, seriously, she's not Russian. She's a paralegal. Oh, man, seriously. I'm like, seriously, go talk to her. And a couple have admitted to her and joke with her.
Yeah. It's a
And
running joke.
I thought you were Russian. I was like, well, clearly you haven't been downtown with all the Russian girls because they're all mostly 6 foot.
Yeah, that's true. I'm a little too short for that.
So then prior to this meeting, how many times did you go overseas? Can you describe what it's like being a paralegal?
Yeah, so because I started out dental tech, my first, and I wouldn't even call Guam really an overseas assignment, but it was out of the continental 40,
Sure.
states. But Guam was kind of my second assignment, and so that's where I went. But then Korea was really my first overseas assignment at all. So once I had retrained, so most of that had been, I started out at Hill. I went to Guam. I actually had a follow on from Guam back to Hill. Which was not planned either. And then from Hill, I went to McCord. Yeah, I'm thinking McCord. And then from McCord to Korea. So started out dental. Guam was an interesting place actually to do dental because it is an island and the water's not consistent and neither was the electricity at that time.
Does that mean the teeth aren't?
So that just meant we had a lot of downtime.
Oh,
Okay.
A lot of
I thought
downtime.
you were going somewhere completely else.
Different. Sorry.
Snorkeling? Did you do that?
Did a lot of diving actually. I
Diving.
became a certified diver in Guam. Loved my assignment there. Did a lot of anything you can, boonie stomping, big island hopping, diving, any of that.
Boonie stomping.
Boonie stomping. That is the forests of Guam. You do hikes. You hike through, and try to avoid all the brown tree snakes and all the fun stuff. But
What's the terrain
That's
like
enough.
there? Is it pretty flat or is it a lot more mountainous?
it's a little bit
jungly?
mountainous. It's a little bit jungly. It's like just a mountainous kind of an island, but it's very small. It's like 4 miles long or wide and 8 miles long. It's kind of a very small island.
Yeah, we went through there on the way coming back from Singapore. I was there twice. Once coming back from Singapore, and I don't remember the other one, but but I was just right on base.
Yeah.
A little bit downtown, a little bit of snorkeling, and then back out.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I didn't get to see the interior.
Oh, well, just only need about 3 hours to drive all the way around it. But we used to really hang out with the locals and do a lot of festivals. They did a lot of cockfighting down there. That was a big sport and thing that they would do there. And so we would, hang out in those events and a lot of that kind of stuff. It was a really great assignment. It was a lot of fun. But it is a small island, so you kind of get a little bit of islanditis and you can only drive the island so many times, but I did diving. I also traveled to, lots of the Chejudo, a lot of the islands around Guam, was able to do that and dive in some really like Seventh Wonder type places, Palau and some of those places to dive. So it was an amazing experience.
Is that a 1 year tour?
It was a 2-year tour for me because technically it would have been, but I was going to go accompanied and ended up not going accompanied, but went by myself. And so it was a 2-year tour for me.
Yeah.
So
That is a long time on an island like that.
It's a long time on an island, but you can't beat a 2-year paid vacation. So
Yeah.
the best islands, the best beaches on the island are on the base on Anderson stuff. So then
The guy that took over for me in the shop, we had that AFE guy podcast, and he just slipped in there once on one of his deployments. He was defending America's freedom in Guam.
Right, exactly.
It's a good gig if you can get it.
Yeah.
Shout out to Todd Anderson.
There you go. Yes. So it was a great assignment. And then I retrained shortly after that to paralegal. And that's where I was. And that's what I did in Korea as well. So that's really the only overseas assignments I actually got to do after all my big desires. That's really kind of all that I got to do.
The positive of those two career fields, meaning you can do them, outside of the Air Force, but also might not give you much chance to deploy much in those capacities and stuff, I suppose. I had no idea.
Well, actually, dental, there was deployment opportunities. We definitely have wartime. We do a lot of the remain identifications, so that would be one of our primary responsibilities in those situations. And so, deployed once as a dental tech, and then many times as a paralegal. Paralegals, we do our traditional day job there as well, but there's also wartime things that we would, we do prisoner of war type of situations, all those legal contracting issues and things like that.
Pretty
when
important stuff, though.
yeah, pretty
You
interesting.
start getting into
You don't
the
think about
POW
it.
and remain stuff.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
pretty high test.
Yeah, it was. I was as a first, I was a young airman, senior airman, I think, doing, learning how to do identify remains and such.
Speaking of that, did you ever do any of the joint
I did.
fighter, the
JPAC.
JTFFA,
It was JPAC when I went. Yep, I went in 2005.
full accounting, Joint Task Force full accounting?
Yep.
Like, did you go into like
I
Vietnam
went to
or Laos?
Vietnam
or-
for 32 days.
Okay, go ahead and
I
explain
went
what
to,
that is.
So it's at the time it was called Joint Pacific Accounting Command, where they were responsible to look for investigate any and all potential remains, whether it's I'm not quite sure today, but they were going to Vietnam, Laos, North Korea. They were even doing underwater trips, kind of all over, but basically responsible to investigate any potential. They have missing Air Force folks. They have files on flight plans that 2 pilots left on this particular aircraft at this day and never to be seen from again. They had flight plans, and then they also have a bunch of witnesses over time, and they had certain coordinates of things, and they would send out these investigative teams to go investigate a certain location and see whether or not this location is meets kind of a criteria that they had set to go look for remains. And then as a life support guy, there's a life support investigator on the team, because typically when I went in 2005, 35 years ago, somebody had died. The only thing really remaining is going to be some potential bones and, or most importantly, the equipment
Right.
that would help us identify who they were. So as a member on a team, so I went, again, paid vacation to Hickam to do some, evidence collecting training, that kind of stuff. And then from there, I went to Thailand for 2 days while they're working on visas and all that kind of stuff. And then I went to Vietnam for 32 days. I was a part of a recovery team. They have IT's investigative team, recovery teams, and I think another one, I can't remember. I was a part of a recovery team, originally planned to go to a particular site. So in Hawaii, we did research on, hey, here's the 2 pilots we're looking for. Here's the type of equipment they'd be wearing. This is the site you're going to. The site I was going to, found out after the fact that they were going to send me because it was kind of high terrain. Most of the permanent party there at JPAC is like, yeah, I don't want to hike there. One of the guys that worked there, Dale Moratis, was my superintendent at OSA on a previous assignment. He's like, yeah, he can handle that. So that's the site that I was originally planning to go into. We had to go to a heliport every morning. They were going to helicopter us in. And for 7 days, we watched the Vietnamese pilot come out and look at the terrain, look at the clouds, look at us, shake his head no, and walk back in with his briefcase. And we went to another hotel. After about 7 or 8 days, the team leader got a message, hey, that the site we were supposed to go to was going to need like an actual 30 days, and they realized we weren't going to be able to do that. So they took the core team of us, which is about 8 of us. You got a photographer, an EOD specialist, a med tech, team sergeant, life support guy, team leader, and they broke us off and made us a investigative team. So as an augmentee, not a permanent party, I got to do investigative team that normally is reserved for permanent party. So we landed in Hanoi, stayed at the Hanoi Hilton, not
Yeah.
the Vietnam War Hanoi Hilton. I did get to go tour that museum, but I got to travel from there all the way down to about 30, 45 minutes south of Da Nang. Through the 30 days, we just went and looked at potential sites, and we did the work to investigate to decide whether they were good for future excavations. So it was very rewarding as far as to know that the government's still, to this day, doing that kind of work, trying to find folks that were missing from that conflict.
The leave no one behind kind of deal. And I got a special insight to that. Good Friday, I think, was March 29th this year. And I've got this book about Vietnam, their stories in their own words. It's this big, thick book. I'll tell you more about it later. But I've interviewed 2 people, and they're already going to do 2 more, and maybe even another 1 or 2. But they have on that day, 29 March, like is Vietnam Vet Day, and so I went there with the book because they're going to have a book signing too, because they had like 7 of the people in the book that were there, and they have in South Dakota. Yeah, I'm sure each state has this, maybe even each city. It was a list of their POWMIA, probably all services, and there are 7 in South Dakota. And when they have their ceremonies, their moments of silence, and they have a meeting, talk about VA stuff and all that. But then when they have their ceremony, and they have their I don't remember the name of the table, but it's when they have dining outs. They have that table for those missing.
Table.
Yeah, and so they read the names and what part of the service they were in, and they end it basically saying, "Hopefully, when we meet here next year, we'll take one of these off." And so they're out there waiting, and that just kind of hit me there because I've known about this. I never did volunteer for one of those, but people all over the country waiting to hear word, and it's good that the nation's still working on that.
It's nice to know that dedication, and like when you go there for the training for the investigative part, and how to make sure you're collecting evidence is because it's potentially disputed, but technology with DNA makes it a little easier. The problem is that as further and further we get with time, in order for DNA to work, you still got to have a family member, and because it's further and further time, you get, but yeah, it was probably one of the most significant things that I felt like I've done, just because of the history of that. We were walking through sites, I got tons of pictures and stuff of Vietnam, walking through the jungle of Vietnam at 2 PM, and you had to use a flash on a camera to get the picture. And you just immediately think back to, if I was in the situation 35 years ago, you never know when your next shower is going to be, when your next bullet's going to, or when the next bullet's coming by, when your next, like, it made you had no choice but to think about those that came before, and we say that all the time and stuff, but I was like, we had to, we complained because we had to take 2 big bottles of water with us every time we went out on a hike because there's a chance we could get stuck. And that was a big deal.
Yeah.
But yet when you're there, you're like, you still, we flew on a Vietnamese aircraft to a certain location, and from the air, you could still see bomb craters. This is 30 some years later, and you're still seeing that. We found all kinds of mortars and stuff laying around.
Going back in time.
Yeah. I mean, it thinks like, and it made me appreciate ever since that trip I went back and watched a bunch of the movies.
Yes, I believe it.
Because now, you see, I got to, because of the site and all that kind of stuff, we moved from hotel to hotel, but it also gave me an opportunity to go see the Hanoi Hilton. I got to see all kinds of things that I wouldn't have seen had I went to that site. But yeah, it was really, really cool. And on the way back, stopped through Thailand again, then go back to Hickam. Flew her out to Hickam while I was report writing. She was hanging out on the beach, but we got to enjoy doing some snorkeling in Hawaii. But yeah, that was one of the, like I said, one of the better things I've got the fortunate opportunity to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was pretty awesome. I know it definitely impacted him when he got back. It was watching those movies and him being able to relate to those experiences and just the impact of what that has to know that your country is still looking and committed, to finding those who are left behind. So we're not going to leave behind, but it was very impactful.
Yeah.
So it was great.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah.
So you've held some positions through your career.
Yeah.
So why don't you go through some of those as, okay, you've had the wedding bells, and then what happened?
From that point on, I basically, I don't think anything really exciting other than, as my career progressed, I was running legal offices as far as the master sergeant and senior master sergeant. I think as I was a senior, I was assigned to a special operations command. I did a special duty out of Tampa for 4 years. And that was really an exciting and eye-opening. I did do a deployment also in Florida for Operation Noble Eagle which is United States Defense, which was also
Tough one.
very, yeah. I mean, it was Florida, true, but 12-hour days, 6 hours, 6 days a week, 7 days a week.
Staying in officers' quarters with a rental car.
Well, that aside, but the mission was very, very interesting. Taught me a lot about things that we don't see as Americans, on the news every night. But interdiction, drug interdiction, and then also just the normal things that happen every day that we don't, just to protect our country. Just our actual states. I'm not thinking of the right word, but anyway, it was a very exciting opportunity to learn about that mission and what we do and how that happens. And then to go pretty much after about a year or two later, I went to Special Operations Command and was able to work at SOCOM in Tampa, and as a paralegal to be involved in some of those rescues of like Jessica Lynch and some of those others, that things that had already happened, but that we were, a part of. And so it was just, I was able to fly while he was in Qatar and be able to do a mission over there in Qatar and with our special operations guys.
Still weren't allowed in the same room, by the way.
Right. We weren't still allowed in the same room.
Yeah,
General
That's
Order
true.
1.
General Order 1. Yes.
And her attorney boss was like, "You guys are married, no big deal." And I'm like, "Dude, it's not worth the stripe. I mean, it is worth the stripe.
But it's not
But
worth
I'm
the
here to
stripe.
tell you,
It's not.
if somebody sees me coming out of the room, they're going to be pissed, and they would love to tell on me because they don't have the opportunity." So
Yeah. Not going to happen. So,
But that is where we decide to have our 12-year-old upstairs.
yeah, that's where we kind of talked about the expansion of our family. At this point, we're thinking about what that looks like. We're both kind of getting to the point of, I was almost, I won't say my age, but I was almost 40 at that point, so it was just kind of like, where is this? We both have had very great careers and had done and seen a lot and experienced a lot, and kind of what was the next step for us. And so that was kind of where those conversations actually took place. I think we were kind of getting closer to retirement.
That is where it took place. It was, I debated for a long time, never really interested in kids. I supervised a lot of single parents, and I had enough war stories as a supervisor to be like, yeah, I'm good. But I always used to wonder what was wrong with me. Like, why didn't I want kids? And I never went to a chaplain for advice. I'm not saying that because I'm proud or nothing like that. I just,
Right.
Some of that's probably dumb, right? Because you shouldn't be afraid to go talk to somebody if you need to talk to somebody. But that's probably the only time that I ever thought about, maybe I should just talk to a counselor, because counseling's not going to, or the chaplain's not going to judge me. But at least he may be honest, and I say, well, what? Like, what's wrong with me? Why don't I want kids? Well, nothing's wrong with you. But that always used to bother me, to the point where I hated Mother's Day. Mm-hmm. Because Kat would see Mother's Day commercials, or her sisters would call and say what they got for Mother's Day, and I'm like, turn the channel.
Yeah.
Because I felt like I was the reason why, which clearly.
Yeah. Well, that's very natural things that you're feeling, and me knowing, and we'll get more into later, you're deeper into your career and how we met, but very driven. I mean, extremely driven.
Yep.
And, you wanted to do the best you could for our career field till day one, almost feeling guilty for retiring, just because you did that much for us. But it wasn't a bragging right thing for you. It's because you cared and you wanted to keep going. And, having children is a big commitment.
Well, and I supervised a lot of people that I felt like their kids became my problem. Mm-hmm. And that's where, of course, the Air Force is different than somebody working at AT&T, is because it's a family, right? And so what people do off duty is no such thing, because there is no off duty time. So you have to care about all that kind of stuff. And, of course, joining in 89, things were different back then, you had supervisors that would tell you the government didn't issue that kid, so that's your problem, kind of thing. And, that was one of those things that we had talked about kids, but it was never a forced thing. And I think, drawn to her because she was independent and she was good at her job, and I was, focused, and I cared about my job. But that was one of the things that, like, with the discussion of a kid, it could completely upset the apple cart. She's on a trajectory. When we met, I had a line number for tech sergeant. Fortunately, we never had to study together because we got promoted off years.
Right.
You know, I made tech. I had to wait a year to put it on. The next year she makes tech. And then the first time I test for master, I make it. She doesn't test until the following year. She makes it. You know, so we had all that going on to where the thought of if you had a kid, and I just didn't want to deal with the responsibility, and be honest, you know, anybody that knows me knows that, you know, I had an alcoholic father that I always used to think was not a great example for a lot of things. And that was bothersome to me that, you know, I don't want to repeat that cycle.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really know if I truly believe that. I just know it was a great excuse.
Right.
Right?
That was
Like,
just going through my head here.
you
It's
know,
a
like
good rationalization, right?
because you look at it, you know, and I think now, well, if I just would have thought like I normally think, well, if you just don't do those things, you'll kill it. If you just don't do a lot of those things he did, what do you got to worry
Good.
about?
Yeah.
But I think that was, you know, I gave into a habit when somebody said, "You got any kids?" I'm like, "No." Yeah, I had plenty of good excuses, but they weren't. I don't think they were true excuses. It was just a common, and it was kind of quick, and it got off the conversation. But that's again that we were very competitive. I used to joke with everybody about her making master sergeant. There's a lot of our friends out there still know that, like, if she don't make it, she's moving to the basement. that would come back to bite me later.
Yeah.
But that was
Yeah.
a part of the thought process of just didn't want to upset what we had going, and we were enjoying it because we were married. We were married for 10 years before we had Cody.
10? Okay. Yeah. I was
Yeah.
going to ask that.
And I was going to say, I mean, in this situation, it was also exactly the opposite because I came from a big family, had lots of kids. We had traveled the world with a big family. I didn't see really anything as a barrier. I didn't see it as a loss of focus. I was like, well, you know, I gotta have kids. Like, this is how, you know, how I grew up, and like I gotta have
It's what you
children.
do.
It's what I do, right? I mean, it's just like they're just like, what do you mean? There's who's gonna take care of me when I'm old? You know, like I had all those, you know, I had just completely a different, you know, mindset in that whole discussion. And so for that, you know, I think at that point I had pretty much given up. Like I was like, this is not going to happen.
I remember one
think we
conversation,
decided-
and it was never pressure. It was just, if we're not, can we fix something permanently so we could quit the
possibility or just
pull the goalie, whatever you want to call it. Or, you know,
Yeah.
like we want to, if we're not going to do it, let's just fix it and make it permanent so we don't have to have all these precautions.
Right.
And I said, I can't tell you I'm going to feel the same in 2 years. So I can't tell you that
Mm-hmm.
I don't want a kid in 2 years. I can't. And for whatever reason, that's what happened. And I thought about all that long and hard. And I used to wonder, you know, I when I was in, I did a 365 at Cutter as the AOR superintendent, as you know, for the career field. And I was over there, one of two enlisted folks in all of the operations directorate, and I spent overwhelming 98% of the time by myself. So I had a lot of time to reflect.
Wow.
And I spent a lot of time in terminals flying to Iraq, Kuwait, Afghanistan, waiting on the next flight getting canceled. And anybody knows I don't read. I struggled with Cliff Notes. I just
you can
wasn't.
read, you just don't.
But I actually read some books. That's how much alone time I had. But I had a lot of time to think, you know, what's all this worth? At some point, I'm going to have to take off the uniform. And all you have left at that point is family. So what is it? And the short story was I had tons of thoughts with myself. One of my best buds, Dave, I had talked to him about it, and he's just said, you know, because he was one that was 50-50, having kids. If I have them, great. You know, since then he'd had a kid, and he's like, I can't imagine my life without.
Right.
You know, and I was always willing to be like, yep, I got it. And he just said, hey, man, that's just something that you have to think through. And but he gave me some great advice. Number one was, you have to be, you know, and he admitted, you're no spring chicken, you know. And he said, she's not of normal age of just starting to have kids. So, like, what happens if you guys agree to have a kid and then her eggs are rotten or your swimmers are all dried up. I'm like, what do you do at that point?
Mm-hmm.
Are you okay with adopting? And I'm like, I never thought about that. And he said, dude, once you open that can of worms, then you have to be prepared to all those things. And I thought about it, and that was one of the things that I really did think was that if this was meant to be, then it's going to be you and I's kid. So if it doesn't work and it wasn't meant to be, I'm not willing to adopt. Nothing against that. That's great. It just wasn't what I wanted. If we were going to do it, I really wanted, and this is kind of scary, but a mini me. Because there's some of that sitting upstairs.
Oh yes, oh yes, for sure.
And so,
But he could be reading though right now, possibly from what I've heard.
Yes, he's actually got some of my traits. Some.
yes. But that was, so long story short, I made the decision. Like she said, she deployed for about 3 weeks from SOCOM over to Qatar where I was. And I just said, we got to have that conversation. And being the rules guy, at the end of the night, I walked her back to her dorm room. And when I left, I remember going back to my room and I felt like somebody lifted a 1,000-pound weight off me.
Nice.
Like that must have been right because like I feel like I just got something off my chest that's been, and then it was just the fun part, right? You just, but I had to wait until
He's a return from Qatar.
April
but
or May, whenever it was.
meanwhile, I'm in a shock and coma over there.
Yeah.
Like, what has just happened?
What'd you do?
Yeah.
What'd you do with my
Like,
husband?
literally, I just can't tell you how much I had just kind of moved on from that kind of conversation. I had just, decided for my own sanity that was really kind of not where this was going to go. And so, like, I don't want to kind of say he dropped it on me, but he kind of just dropped it on me. Like, there was no, I didn't know he was thinking about this. I did not know all of that was going on internally. So he was really pretty compartmentalized about kind of how that, I mean, he probably didn't want to get my hopes up or anything. I'm sure that was probably part of that thought process. But I was pretty much in a coma, like, what just happened here? And
Well, you can't get
Who
that
was
toothpaste
that?
back in the tube. You know what I mean? Like,
no, that was,
if you're willing to
I
go,
was
you
like,
gotta
okay,
you
yep.
gotta commit.
yep,
Like
that
you
was-
said, get one past the goalie.
That's what I'm
that
saying.
was-
You're
that
in.
was it. So
So explain the joint spouse thing for people that don't know.
doing joint spouse. So in the military, your assignment process is dependent on you serve in your own right. So there's no guarantee. The Air Force is not obligated to make sure that as we are a couple that we're stationed together. And so we just always, you always kind of have to be prepared, really, to not be serving your assignment together. So that's probably not, I don't know if that's like the best.
Which is another
description.
part of that, just being her and I, again, the decision the year before for me to volunteer to go be the AR superintendent was a conversation that just involved her and I. Hey, what do you think about doing this?
Right.
Supposedly it may be good for my career, but like my commander at the time's like, why are you volunteering to deploy to the desert for a year? And I'm like, well, honestly, I'm at a tanker unit. I feel like I'm at a game and I'm sitting on the bench. I'm a sports guy. I want to be in the game. So, and it's kind of funny because he's like, dude, that's admirable. And 8 months later, guess where he was? In the AOR as a tanker guy, as a C-17 group commander. But that was something that I was like, I think it's going to be great and it's going to suck for us to be apart. And, 100% to her credit, it's like, hey, if you think it's the best thing for your career, again, both of us career focused.
I did think that was a dumb decision later, but
It took
just
about
for the
30
record,
days
I
to
was
be like,
like,
what the hell was we thinking?
Yeah, whose conversation? What conversation was this? This was
was dumb.
stupid. This was dumb, but we made it through. But I think we did worry about that. Even when we decided to get married, trying to get an assignment together. He was in Dover, I was in Langley. Our ranks, you were tech sergeant, I was a tech sergeant. I think I had made tech by that point, or I was gonna
Still
sew
staff.
on. Yeah, I think I was gonna be putting it on here at some point. But rank matters. The position availability matters. Can you find two different career fields at the same base at the same time? So we looked at both him coming to Langley, me going to Dover, and what the Air Force could support and would they support it? That's always really the question. And we applied and we were approved. And so we felt very, very lucky. They were able to move me up, which was another thing. We had just both gotten back from a remote. So we hadn't been at our base very long. And usually you've got to have some retainability for the Air Force to move you again.
So the mystery office came through for you.
The mystery office,
Yeah,
yes.
so they
had some.
we got married in December, and they wouldn't move her until March because March is when she would have had a year on
I had
station.
to have a year
So
on
they couldn't
station
move her
in order
under
to
that
do
year.
that. Yep. So that was definitely a consideration. And every assignment up until that point, I mean, we were always prepared. We always kind of knew. We did a lot of deployments. I did mine. He did his. We went several
Well,
times.
and if you're not married, every assignment's a remote,
Right. True.
right? So, but to get married and then to serve in your own right is one thing, but to bring a child into that to where we could still be separated, and now whether we didn't choose to, but now one of us is a single parent.
Yep.
And the other part of that original conversation I go back to was that we had both served 20 years at that point. And I said, so if we're willing to do this,
Right.
and we get
Yeah,
forced
options.
to be served because we were both senior master sergeants at that point. I think she was. We were both senior master sergeants at that point. So the choices, being the top 2% of the Air Force, were getting like this. So to be able to, matter of fact, I did the remote to 365, and the only place supposedly that mystery center could send us to was Dias in Abilene, Texas,
Yep.
Yeah.
which was not on our what they call the dream sheet. Right?
Yeah.
But
A
which
true Misty Dream.
end up being, a great assignment. But that's the other concern about, okay, well, now you bring a kid into that. And then we both talked a good game as far as if we were forced, one of us would just retire.
Yeah, because at least you had that out.
Option.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't have that option.
And we
so.
had several significant conversations since we had Cody with assignments where we were potentially going to be, I got non-voled to the chief job at AMC, where she was just hired the year before to be the chief at Langley. And I made chief, couldn't stay there. And her boss at the time was a 1-star general who said, well, hold on a minute. What do you mean you're leaving? I just hired you here not even a year ago. But it's kind of funny because we go to Scott, and about a year and a half later, that same 1-star was now the Air Force Judge Advocate General 3-star, and calls her up and says, hey, I want you to be the senior paralegal manager for the Air Force.
There you go.
Why don't you come to the Pentagon?
Those are the titles I was hearing years ago.
Yeah.
That title right there.
Yeah.
And
Pretty
she's
cool.
like, well, I would love to go. And I'm like, well, I didn't sign up to be a single parent. Like, I understand you'd love to go. And the 3-star's like, well, couldn't we just get Mark to do something with the F-35 up here at the Pentagon?
Yeah.
Like,
It was all about finding you a job.
yeah, like there's all kinds of jobs. And, so we had struggled numerous times before we had Cody on, we were both going to be first sergeants at one point because we were, I was at Dover, superintendent of, 30-some people, and I felt like 80% of my job was doing first sergeant work.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, well, why don't I just do first sergeant full time? And actually, she deployed, and she had already met with command chief, was going to be a first sergeant, and that was back whenever you submitted your paperwork is when you went to school. And she held off on her paperwork because she was deployed, and we were going to try to go be first sergeants at the same time. Command chief was like, oh, you got no kids, paralegal background, ops background, you guys would be great for sergeants. And I met with, of course, I told you I played a lot of softball, and one of the guys I played softball with was an MPF guy, and he's like, hey, man, saw me at the BX. He's like, I think you got an assignment. I'm like, what? And she had been applying for all kinds of assignments, but we both applied. My career field would say yes, hers would say no. Her career field would say yes, mine would say no. And when he told me that, I'm like, it's like, if I don't call you Monday by noon, give me a call, and I go home and I'm looking on
Every
the beginning
system there is.
databases at that time, virtual MCF, and I'm like, I got assignment to the 91st Air Refueling Squadron at MacDill. Did you apply for MacDill? What's going on? She was deployed at the time. She's like, well, I did, but it was months ago.
Months and months ago. Yeah.
And so we went to MacDill, and I couldn't be a first sergeant because I was selected for assignment. And then that was our 4-year
That was my special
deal.
duty. So I didn't think I got it, and I didn't know I got it.
At
so,
SOCOM, she was the first paralegal to actually
yeah, to have
fill that
that
position. Her
Air Force
boss was a Navy JAG.
Yep.
Nice.
Yeah, it was a very interesting, I wanted to do the job. Didn't really want to live in Florida. I know that probably sounds weird, but really wanted to do that job and do operations. I was really kind of wanting to branch out into that. Our legal world was really going a lot of different places with the operational world. And so we were kind of on the cusp of that and how that was going to look. And I wanted to be on the ground floor. So that was an assignment for me that was kind of purely just for me.
Well, and
So
it was,
everyone's like, don't take the job. You're not going to get promoted. You're going to be out of the main corps. You know, and I was a senior master sergeant. No, I was a master at the time. And they're like, don't take it.
yeah, because that was
So-
back when the senior, that's when the promotions come out on the computer. So it was when commanders used to do it, but everybody found out beforehand. And then you found out by the computer. So I found out that I made senior by myself, changing because I worked out that morning, looking at my computer. Her boss was a Navy JAG, didn't understand how the Air Force system works. So he found out that it's going to be on the computer. So he tells everybody at work, hey, we need everybody to stand around Cat's
I'm
desk.
like, no, what if I don't make it? Like, that's terrible.
And we're going to see if she makes it.
Like,
Fortunately
"Oh."
for him,
No pressure.
she came on the list.
Yes.
But yeah, she got to do that. That was, I mean, I wasn't even allowed in the building she worked at. So I knew that was a pretty unique opportunity for her. And that tour was only a 4-year control tour. So for me doing that year to the desert, that you could come back and stay wasn't an option because hers was a control tour, or you could move. We had no choice but to move. And then so I not only did a year in the desert, that got us a following trip to Abilene, Texas.
Yeah.
But we were together, so Air Force success.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was
Yeah,
definitely a
definitely.
success story for sure.
Lots of puzzle pieces.
Yes.
No guarantees.
Yes. I am probably have to get ready to go here.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I did want to mention that he did make every career and rank before me except for one,
I knew that was coming.
The last one.
the last one.
Oh,
Oh,
Chief
right,
Master
yeah.
Sergeant.
Yeah. So
How much did you beat him by?
And I-
By that 1 year separation?
Well, she don't
Yeah.
want to compare scores. It's a different career field. We don't want to compare
we
state
don't
scores.
know, right?
Right.
No, let's not do that. But I think it was that next year you made it, right?
I did. I was the first loser. The year she made it. As a matter of fact,
It was quite painful.
I'll
Actually,
tell you the story when she leaves about conversations I had with the group chief and command chief about stratifications. But yeah, so yeah, matter of fact, the day she made it, I had the command chief show up at my desk. I was an instructor down at the schoolhouse. Walks in, I stand up because the command chief's in the office, and I stand up. He's like, "Hey, Mark. Hey, man, sorry, I don't know how else to tell you. Your name's not on the list, but grab your hat, grab your stuff. Let's go celebrate. Your wife's name was on the list." I was like,
How does that make you feel?
I said,
How
I've
do
never
you
been so
process
happy
it?
and so sad at the same time in my life. And then we walk out, and I'm like, I don't even know what's going on here. And I'm like, well, Cat's on there, and we're walking out the hallway. I was like, well, how many people on base made it? And he said 3. And I was like, damn. And all I could think was, and I ain't one of them. That's some bullcrap. So we walk out the front door, and there's the wing commander staff car. And I was like, and you had to bring the wing commander to tell me I didn't make it? I appreciate that, too.
yeah.
So we get in the car. I get in the back seat. Felt like it was a cop car. Wing commander turns around. At the time, it was who's now 4-star General Van Herk, who's commander of Northcom. Turns around and he says, "Hey, Mark, I thought for sure that you both were going to be on." He said, "Actually, me and I think it was Chief Lindsay. We talked about it for quite some time, trying to figure out a scheme of how we were going to tell you both at the same time. Unless we was able to tell you both at the same time, one of you was going to have to know first." And we had several conversations. Fortunately, it worked out. We didn't have to worry about it. I'm like, that's not fortunate.
Made it easier.
And I
for
just
them.
said, look, I said, if I didn't make it, but she did, I know it's deserving no far. And
Absolutely.
I said, honestly, we all know who wears in the pants in the family anyway. That just makes it official. And he said, well, at least you can joke about it. And I said, well, my wife just made chief. Like,
This is great.
but it sucked for her, I know, because
It was hard, yeah.
when you got 3 people on base, they had the Surrey bus that comes, and all the chiefs were in there. So we all go over, and we all converge onto the legal office, and they walk upstairs. She has no idea. Her situation awareness is not very good anyway.
I'm with you on that.
Yeah.
But they all walk in, and they just ambush her. Congratulations. There's like 11 or 12 chiefs in there. And she's like, ah. And immediately she's like, what about you? And I'm like, ah. And immediately it went from kind of like me, so happy to so sad. And I was like, look,
Yeah. It was-
don't let me spoil your deal. It's a big deal.
It is. Yeah.
Well, we got to you the next year.
Yeah. Yeah. So I missed it by less than a point.
Yeah. That was quite hard.
And I had to wait a whole year.
Kept trying to remind him though of every single year that he would make, whatever rank it was, way before me. And scored higher, first timer, and I'm just like, oh, I'm running out of chances here. Like, it's just like, this is not going to happen.
And you cross that finish line.
Yeah,
And it was the final one,
like,
too.
That
You know,
last
so I
little
can't-
push. That
there's nothing I can do about that.
that just ended on that note for sure. But I'm going to have to head
Yeah.
out.
Well,
Yeah.
congratulations on your career, both you guys. We're going to
thank you.
continue on here
Yeah.
after we reset, but I'm just glad I finally got to meet you. I've seen you in pictures a lot. Of course, he's a picture guy.
Yes,
We're going to get into that
for
as
sure.
well.
Oh, boy.
But yeah, it was great getting to meet you and getting to hear about your career.
Absolutely.
And
Thanks for having me. It was a wonderful experience, and
yeah,
it's pretty awesome. So I'll have to correct anything he says later.
Absolutely.
Although it doesn't seem like my recollection is probably more accurate anyway. So
she's going to want to see the edit first, I
right,
suppose.
yeah, I know, right?
Her memory and geography are one
But
and the
thank
same.
you so much for
Yeah, you bet.
for
Thank
having
you.
us. Yeah, it's good to be here.
All right, we'll reset.
Okay.
All right, so we are reset here, just you and I. And I know we've used a lot of acronyms and things that will mean something to some people and some not to
Some that
others.
will not.
Yeah, but I remember as after I became the F-16 weapon system team chief in the Guard for our career field, that is the first time I saw you. And we were talking about it earlier today and a little bit here when you did that 365 day. And you describe your trip coming back because they wanted you to come back. Well, first explain what the AOR is, what you were doing there, and then explain your trip back.
Yeah, so the AOR is the area of operations, and they created instead of having a permanent party position over in I was on the Air Force Forces staff, so operations. So they had a position for aircrew flight equipment that was basically responsible for an AOR superintendent, so responsible for all the other AIF technicians throughout the entire area of operations. So at the time, this was 2009 to 2010, so it included Iraq, Afghanistan, Kuwait, Manas, Kyrgyzstan. That's enough. But it was all the folks over there, and that's why I felt like I said earlier, I kind of wanted to get in the game. So it's if our equipment is going to be used, regardless of type of weapon system, that's where it's got the most probability of being used, and you really could see, at least from my perspective, instantaneous job satisfaction. So they had a 365 day deployment to work over there at the Combined Air and Operations Center as part of the Air Force Forces staff. So I volunteered to do that, and I was selected to go do that. And that's, again, I never had done a staff job, but I was also not, I deployed 2 years prior to that at Al-Udeid as the superintendent at the wing. So I knew what that entailed at the wing, but now I was going to be the guy responsible for all that and all the different wings. So any kind of problems or situations, whether it be personnel, equipment, whatever the case may be.
At least you had that prior experience.
I had that prior experience, and again, I thought that it was going to give me hopefully experience that was going to get me to that next promotion to Chief Master Sergeant with like legit experience on what things I would need to know to help better equip our folks on normal day-to-day operations and while preparing for.
Yeah, you mentioned using of the equipment. Can you explain what that is a little more about our career field and the equipment and how it's used and what it means to the mission?
Yeah, there's probably, I don't know, tons of better up. I usually explain it. I just met some friends of Cats earlier this week, and I was showing you what I call my shadow desk, and I was showing those guys, and they asked, well, what'd you do in the Air Force? And I said, well, it depends on when, but the overwhelming majority of my time in the Air Force, I was responsible for making sure that anything and everything that we put on an airplane or we attach to a pilot or an aircrew member or potentially give to a passenger was good for them to survive a day that they didn't want to encounter. So any kind of emergency, whether it be a heavy aircraft where you're ditching life rafts, life preservers, oxygen equipment, where you have smoke and fumes in the cockpit or in where the passengers are, to fighter equipment that obviously you're most intimately with is the ejection seat, survival kit, parachute, night vision goggles, anything and everything, like I said, that you would attach to a pilot or aircrew member.
And a lot of that combat search and rescue, the
Yeah.
radio portion of it that's gotten more intricate through the years.
Yep. All the things to give a potential survivor the ability to communicate with us so we know where they are, where they can go pick them up and rescue. So in the AOR, making sure that everybody had all that kind of equipment and the equipment they had was good to make sure that the folks that are actually flying those missions and stuff in Iraq, Afghanistan, Kuwait, wherever the case may be, had everything needed to do to execute what they needed to do.
Mm-hmm.
So that was, again, I was a wing superintendent at Dover, and then I got to be a wing superintendent at MacDill. Both of those were what we call as heavy bases, tanker bases, and cargo strategic airlift bases, C5, C-17. In my days working fighters was staff sergeant, tech sergeant days, a little younger rank, where I was actually doing more of the work.
Mm-hmm. Pretty fun work.
Yes. Well, and again, I used to tell everybody that working in a heavy shop was more like I'm going to date myself, but more like a Laverne and Shirley operation, where you work on this equipment, but very rarely does anybody use it, so you don't really know. But, in the F-16 squadron in Aviano during Allied Force, I knew instantaneous if something didn't fit right or something didn't work right. Like, there was instant feedback of, hey, can you fix this? Mm-hmm. Bleep, 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 because it feels like crap. And I'm like, well, that's how you know it's fit right.
Right.
But yeah, that was the difference. But that was kind of, for me, being two previous superintendents, kind of culmination of the biggest superintendent job that you could get. So although I didn't want to leave Cat for a year, again, very driven. It was a challenge to have that responsibility, but also potentially help me get to that next level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I just remember I was a brand new team chief. I did 2.5 years in active duty, being the worker bee. But then when you grow in rank and on the guard side of things, and then I loved being part of an F-16 squadron, but no more experiences beyond that until the opportunity came to be a team chief. And that's when I started getting to know you guys, and it's very intimidating for a guy. I mean, I reached that rank, but I didn't know near enough about the active duty side of things, how things work, and that's where it was great being under Chief Snyder's wing, because he really caught on to that quick and helped educate me on the side on all the stuff I was hearing. And that's the first time I met you. So they brought you back to brief specific things on the AOR?
Yeah, they had the annual conference was out in San Diego, and as the AOR superintendent, I come back to give kind of the State of Union for the AOR. So while I was in the AOR, I think I did upwards of probably, of the 300 60. It wasn't exactly 365 because I had to leave for about 3 weeks because my father passed. But I was gone from Al-Udeid, where I slept every night, over 100 days of that, being either in Iraq and Afghanistan, Kuwait, Al-Dhafra, Kyrgyzstan, wherever it was. But I was out actually watching the people perform the mission and making sure that they were doing things that they were supposed to be doing. And I was bringing everything that I saw, whether that be good, bad, indifferent, trends, problems, sets, either back to the MAGCOMs to help me get after. But most of that was to say, hey, here's some things that we see in the AOR, whether it be we got manpower problems, equipment problems, or anything like that. And so they brought me back to do that and got me a free trip back to the States, to which you normally get one anyway when you're going for a year. But yeah, they brought me back there to do that out in San Diego. And that's where I was talking to you earlier. I flew 14 hours from Qatar to Dulles, changed in my luggage. So I saw my luggage, and then I got back on another airplane and flew nonstop to LA, 5.5, 6 hours, and then an hour flight from LA to San Diego. And I get there at 1 a.m. And because I was coming back to the States to do this briefing, the colonel gave me a 4-day pass also. So we had arranged to fly a cat out to get to see me for basically 5 days. And at this point, I hadn't seen her in 8 months. And of course, I get in 1 a.m. and they lost my luggage.
Yeah, on that last airplane where you had your eyes on
where I
in
saw
LA.
it. They lost my luggage, and I'm thinking, I haven't seen my wife in 8 months, and I'm wearing the same drawers I wore 2 days ago.
Yeah, you were pretty drug out.
Yeah.
And just
I might
towing
have
the line.
had a beer or two.
Yeah, who wouldn't? Wow.
Yeah,
I got my eyes opened a lot on that briefing because, like I said, that was my first time there, and to hear you, because you were a senior master sergeant at the time, I think.
Yep. Yeah, and I talked earlier about the JPAC mission to Vietnam, but as far as rewarding career field wise, that was probably one of the most rewarding jobs functionally, because I felt like I was actually where we were and the whole reason why we existed. So I got to meet a ton of people doing a ton of good things.
Did you get a fairly warm reception when you showed up at shops there? Being able to travel that whole area of responsibility?
Most of the time from the A folks, not so much from leadership.
Really?
A lot of leadership at certain times were like, hey, we don't need somebody from AFCENT coming to check on our business. We're here to do real work. We don't need somebody from the staff coming to do a visit.
I would have guessed it would have been 180 out from that, because generally people don't want to be inspected and stuff, but the way you handle people and inspections, and as many people as you knew as well, I would think they would kind of welcome that a little bit. Or, I guess the AFE people would maybe not look forward to that so much, but the leadership would want to know from an outside source that everything's working well.
So
I don't know.
You would think, but most of them look like, or most of them kind of acted like that was like an unnecessary staff. Like, I'm just going to pick up and go to Balad because I want to go to the Balad Iraq Chow Hall. Like, I'm not down here because I got nothing better to do. I mean, I got cable up at the KAOC.
Right.
But it was, I mean, there was times where I had superintendents that would call and say, hey, man, I'd love for you to come down to visit because I need help explaining to my leadership, even at Al-Udeid, I need you to come down locally because the commander doesn't realize, wow, we can't do this mission supporting B1s with 3 people, even though my UTC unit type code that calls for 8.
Yeah.
And my commander needs to hear it from somebody other than me. So that was, I mean, the reception really wasn't always great, but the conversations weren't ever any better either, because most of the time the problem that they were having had something to do with leadership.
Got it.
So
yeah,
I'm sorry I didn't bring these extra 3 eighth guys because I needed a couple extra first sergeants or
Yeah,
something.
they didn't want to finger in their chest.
Yeah.
More of a deal.
And so, and I, the only thing I needed to travel throughout the AOR was a travel authorization letter signed by my boss, which was the 06 colonel. And he's like, hey, if you're out there making things better, don't worry about being here, which was a huge benefit for me because it allowed me to go to those places when people were requesting that. And there's some I hadn't been, and some weren't requesting it, and some didn't want to because they went to the AOR to hide out.
Mm-hmm.
So, but it was good, like I said, rewarding, but also challenging. I was able to learn a whole lot about weapon systems that I never had. I'd never been stationed anywhere with rescue,
Mm-hmm.
but I got to learn a whole lot about rescue and setting up operations that I would never been a part of had I not done that trip.
Yeah. So with going to all those places, that would have been really, really cool to see all those. Were most all of them just one airplane ride from LUD to there, or
No.
did you go deeper in with
No.
smaller aircraft?
No, we, for instance, I went to Manas, Kyrgyzstan. And when we were leaving, I went there through Balad because I went down, or through Bagram, Afghanistan. I went down to Bagram to pick up their superintendent because administratively he was responsible for oversight of the folks at Manas. So I went down to get him and then to go up to Manas. I go down to Bagram and we waited like 4 days to get a flight up to Manas.
Oh, geez.
And as we get a flight, they tell us that you can't take weapons up to Manas. And I had a weapon that I signed out from Qatar. And they're like, well, you got to put that weapon in the amnesty box. And I'm like, no, I signed this out. Like, I'm responsible for this weapon and the ammo. And they're like, you can't get on the airplane. So I had to take the weapon and put it in that superintendent's safe back at Bagram when I went to Manas.
Oh, man.
So when I get done Manas, instead of flying back to Al-Udeid on a C-17, I had to go back to Bagram, to which in order to get back from Bagram, I had to go to Kandahar and wait for another day and then get another flight back.
So are you just flashing this letter every time you want to try to get
I go
on
to the
manifest?
terminal with a travel authorization letter and my ID, and they put me on a waiting list.
Yeah.
And then sometimes you sit there. I learned a lot about rejection. I would get there and they'd be like, hey, sorry, we got no seats left. So I spent a lot of time in terminals. Now, a couple places I went when I went up to Bahrain. I had a lieutenant colonel went with me, and he knew somebody at the C-21 unit. So we got a nice C-21 ride.
Nice.
Up there. Chief Sandlin, Chief Sandlin was at AFCENT doing the air advisor superintendent position at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a 4-month gig, and he wanted to go see the locations throughout Iraq and Afghanistan where they had air advisors. So he's like, hey, my boss wants me to come over. Would you mind showing me around how to travel? Excuse me. And I was like, yeah. So we went. He came to Al-Udeid. Shout out to Shane, but he had a bag as big as this couch, probably mostly the hair care products. And I'm like, dude, where are you going with that?
Are you sending him the link to this when when this comes out?
But he came. He almost got a shot, but he came and we went. It's kind of funny. My orders 365 were to Qatar. So I didn't have to do any of that pre-combat training. I think I shot paintball once at MacDill in the woods.
Right. Yeah.
So I didn't have to go to combat skills training because my orders were Qatar. Mm-hmm. So when we go over there, we were going to the Green Zone in Baghdad. And we have to get there. The superintendent that used to work for me at Baghdad set up the trip for us. And one of the funniest things were we flew into Baghdad. We had to get a convoy to the Green Zone. And we're going to go in this MRAP. I don't even know what that acronym means other than it's a big souped up, looks, if I can say badass vehicle, Mm-hmm. And we have to wait for it and we have to get in this vehicle. And so we get in this vehicle and they're telling us, hey, we're going to go in and out. We're not going to stop. We're going to get to where we're going to get to. And we're in the vehicle and we're going up and, and there's, everywhere over there, and you know, it just doesn't look safe, right? So you don't know, you have no idea what's going to happen. Well, we were somewhere, and evidently Shane realized he had a Kodak moment. So he takes his camera out and he goes to take a picture, but he forgot and he left the flash on. So we had an Army lieutenant colonel in that vehicle with us. And when he took the picture and the flash went off, he said a bunch of bad words. What are you going to do? You're going to get a shot. Like, what are you doing? You know? And when I see Shane still, we talk about that joke today because, you know, it was one of those, I'm sorry, I got, you know, and I put it back.
It's a split-second decision.
Like, yeah, hilarious. But that was one moment. And then the other moment that was really, was the first time that the AOR was ever really real was we got done our visit at the Green Zone. We were talking to this colonel. They were standing up a new fighter aircraft for the Iraqis, and we were trying to help them with simple, hey, we don't have harnesses in order yet. We're going to get them in 3 months. And we're like, absolutely not. It's not going to happen. We had this conversation, and this colonel kept talking to us about bear hunting. And this captain keeps walking in, and he's interrupting. How much time you guys got? You know, I'm good. I got some time. And he would walk back out, and he would still talk about hunting in Russia and bears. And we're wondering what's going on. This captain keeps coming in. He's like, sir, I hate to tell you. He said, but like, we're hearing that they're going to have rockets and stuff in like 15 or 20 minutes. So these guys, if they're going to leave the Green Zone tonight, they got to go.
Go now.
And he's like, all right, guys, well, I guess that's going to wrap it up. And you can go. And we're like, okay. And the guy's like, well, there's a bus out front. And they're going to take you. Or not a bus, but it was like a white van. So me and Shane get in this van, and they take us out. And they're driving us. And they're like, we're just going to get you out of where the Green Zone is. And then you guys can wait over here on the side of the road for your ride back on this MRAP. So we had two. That was me and Shane, and we had this guy Jose with us, and a SEER guy, survival instructor, specialist now, not instructor. Sorry. And so, what do you do in the desert when you're waiting? You go to the chow hall, right? So we're standing there waiting, and they're like, "Hey, the chow hall's right down the street, and you can't go anywhere with bags." So we're like, "You know what? You guys go, and we'll wait on the bags." And literally, they go, and as soon as they take a left, we hear sirens inbound, and they had some third country nationals there doing protection. Mm-hmm. So anybody that's been in survival school, they all wear black. That's how these guys were dressed up. They were in black suits, and they had what looked like muskets. Like these guys are protecting us. But like immediately, no one ever talked to us about shelter, inbound rockets, or anything like that. Right. What to do. And it's kind of like they appeared out of nowhere. Was this big, concrete tunnel with sandbags and stuff on top of it. So they tell us to run in there, and Shane and I run in there, and it's kind of funny because we had never, at least I never experienced that, and they didn't discuss that when I went to paintball shooting in McDill, and we go in there and we're standing there looking, and I was like, I think this is real, man. I don't think this is no right. And he's like, yeah. And he's like, no shit. Where's your body armor? I was like, it's out there in my bag. You gonna go get it? I'm like, no. Because my luck is, if it's going to hit, that's where it's going to hit. It's going to hit me picking up my body armor, so I'm good. But yeah, we still had some good moments.
That's where it's hard to get people motivated for the inspections, operational readiness inspections and exercises. And I used to try to motivate people in our shop by like, man, when we were kids, we would have died to be able to play war, and now we're getting paid to do it. Trying to get people in the mindset, okay, I got to dive under the table. And I was going to ask you about the body armor, if you had that plus side plates and stuff. Because I never went outside the wire, but you were.
No, we never had any. I never had any of that. I mean, when I first got there, I don't know if you knew Senior Master Sergeant Summers, but that's who I replaced. He was on the headquarters AMC staff.
Yeah, I met him twice maybe.
And I got there. We had like 10-day turnaround. He's like, well, I got to take you on an initial trip to show you how to travel around the AOR. And we're going to get down to Kandahar. And the C-130 shop is standing up down there. We just got word, So C-130 shop deployed to Al-Udeid. How you're supposed to pack for bear base. You never know what's going to happen. Well, 30 days after there, they said, hey, you're going down to Kandahar. So we're going to get down and make sure they got everything they need. Mm-hmm. So I'm in country 3 days. We're on a C-130 to Kandahar, and we land, and this guy who at the time was a staff sergeant, I think, Paul, comes and picks us up, and he's in a vehicle that looks like Scooby-Doo's mini mystery van. And it was so dirty that somebody had wrote on the back of it with their finger, "I wish my wife was this dirty." That was the vehicle they came to pick us up in. And before I could get in, I had to take the spare tire out to get in the vehicle and sit in it. And the spare tire, as I'm riding, because of course, we first get there, what do you got to do? You got to go eat. And as I pull this tire out, it's got like 6 plugs in it. And I'm like, Paul, this is the spare? It's got like 6 plugs in it. And that comes back to haunt us later. But yeah, we go and we're eating. You go through a line at the DFAC, and it was kind of, the part where they serve was indoor, and they had picnic tables outside. And we're sitting there, and you could hear, to me, it sounded like EOD was playing games, but you could hear bombs going off. And I was like, dude, what's that? And he's like, it's not close enough. Don't worry about it. I'm like, dude, Steve, what am I doing here? I'm 3 days. Why am I in Kandahar? What's going on? But that was kind of like, oh, so this is what I'm going to be doing. And the first time that I experienced that, because, when I deployed 2 years prior at IUD, there's nothing, other than it just being dirty, hot, windy, and just the typical desert, and wearing those uniforms. Other than that, it's just normal. Every day's Groundhog Day kind of thing, but I didn't have to worry about getting killed any day. But there, down there when you're actually hearing things, and then, we had went around and looked at some of the shops. That shop, they just poured the concrete for their shop 2 days before we had gotten there. And those guys were going out and stealing plywood in the cover of darkness, building things because they had nothing. Like that, for the first time, was like, hey, these guys are really doing it. Like this is kind of, that was kind of cool. And that was 3 days at the beginning of my year-long trip. And that was kind of like, yeah, this is kind of what I signed up for, because it was exciting versus sitting back in the office checking out a file plan or
Yeah. Inspecting or being inspected, pretending you're in war.
Yeah, and that was the fun part, where it was like, this is the closest that you'll ever be, or this is the closest you'll be to what we've consistently trained for. This is kind of the game. This is kind of what all the practice runs were all about. This is what, and so, again, doing that, having these experiences, foreshadowing, when eventually I did get promoted, I can't tell you how many times I leaned on that year experience of the things that I saw that helped me kind of make, at the time, what I thought was the best decision possible, because of what I learned in that simple year.
Mm-hmm. How far into your trip were you when you did come back and brief us?
About 6 months.
Yeah, halfway then.
Yeah, about halfway. Because I went back. They gave me a 4-day pass. That 5 days I was out there, a 4-day pass, and then I went back for 2 months, and then I did my mid tour, and I went back and finished out. I left a little early. I got the Red Cross notification that my father wasn't going to make it.
So that was your last 3 weeks then.
Yeah, what I did was the
was
career field made a decision to take that job and move it back to Shaw, because the pros and cons, and I'd worked with ACC on what we thought was the best. And, the most of my work, other than me visiting those units, most of my work was dealing with ACC and AMC as the force providers. Mm-hmm. And being over at Qatar, they were on completely different time zones.
Right.
And so that the Air Force was also trying to get rid of as many 365s as they could, because, I'm a perfect example. I got a 365 to go to Al Udeid. I was officially assigned at MacDill, and I had a follow-on assignment to Dias. And I had that assignment to Dias 18 months before I ever got there. So technically, I was an inbound to Dias. They wasn't getting a body. And I was assigned to MacDill. They didn't have the body. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, I'm working over there. So the Air Force was like, for every 365, it's counting as 2 positions on the books. and Al-Udeid was becoming a steady state kind of operation. They were trying to convert as many positions they can to be a full year, 1 year remote actual assignment, so that you would get the assignment benefits but not count on the books. So ACC was like, well, what do you think? And I said, well, my only reason not to do that would be if whoever's in this position after me doesn't have the ability to travel and help the units out like I did. And they were like, well, the Standeval folks back at Shaw at AFCENT do a quarterly visit anyway, so you would just go along with them on a quarterly visit. And I said, well, if my position is going to continue to do that, then it only helps with the time zones. And so because I was the last to do that, my replacement was given 180 days while they were working on actually making that senior master sergeant position for AFCENT a permanent party position at Shaw. And so they sent now retired Chief Coffin to replace me, but they only gave him a 6-month TDY order to Shaw. And the ACC was hoping that within that 6 months, they would be able to get that position to a full-time permanent party senior master sergeant position at Shaw. So instead of leaving the first week of April, I left the first week of March, and I went home on emergency leave and took care of that for about 10 days. And then I went to Shaw and finished out the last 3 weeks at Shaw, which is where I was going to do turnover anyway. So I left about 3 weeks earlier than I would have.
Yep.
And finished it out.
Okay. Yeah, I graduated high school with a guy. He's a retired lieutenant colonel. He was on the maintenance officer side at that point. And did they have an office? Some of those offices, were they out of Langley, or was it all out of Shaw? Because I remember him going overseas at times, and he would go visit as many as those bases as possible, and then just come back.
I don't know any that were at Langley. Most of those, because the AFCENT, like the AFCENT A3 operations staff was at Shaw. What we had at Al-Udeid was the Air Force Forces staff. And when I was over there, there was 24 people, and like I said, the colonel, the deputy, me, and like 2 others out of the 24 were on 365s. The rest of all those folks were on 4-month rotational deployments. And so the 365s ones were the ones that they were trying to, but out of the 24, it was just me as a senior master sergeant, and we had a senior airman that was kind of the 06s exec. We're the only 2 enlisted. But yeah, they moved that back, and then I did my last 3 weeks and went back to MacDill, waited 6 months because that's when Cat's 4-year tour ended, and then we proceeded to go to DIAS.
What position did you hold down there? You said instructor?
I was an instructor at the 436 Training Squadron, and we taught, when I initially got there, the program manager's course for aircrew flight equipment. And then based on my AOR experience, we developed a NCO deployment leadership course. So it was a 2-day community college Air Force course. Basically, we updated everybody that was going to be in the AOR as a NCOIC mandated to go to that class at DIAS. And that way they could, we was teaching them all of the things that I saw in the year, on things that you need to make sure prep-wise, things that you need to make sure execution-wise, and things you need to make sure you do post-deployment-wise, like reconstitution, mobility bins, and all that kind of stuff. So all those experiences I got for a year. We developed that class. We did the CCEL class, and we did an aircrew flight equipment officer course. So we developed 3 new courses while I was there. And I eventually became the squadron superintendent as well as the primary instructor for aircrew flight equipment courses there. And that's actually where I worked for a commander that actually ended up doing my retirement.
Oh, nice.
B1 pilot. And that's, again, that was another different rewarding, but, based on those four courses, we was seeing about 500 folks from our career field cycle through the schoolhouse.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to meet a lot of good people, all ranks, all weapon systems, that not only did the, benefited, but I also got to benefit from their experiences in those classes. And again, I thought that was something very impactful, and that kind of goes back to the previous story where, the thought process of even chiefs that were in our career field that were kind of looking out for me was like, dude, you do this 365, more than likely you'll make chief. And I didn't. And in some ways it actually hurt me because I was still TDY assigned to McDill, but I wasn't permanent party. So the 3-star over at Half Cent didn't own me, and the McDill leadership didn't know me. So it actually put me behind when it comes to stratification. And I know you guys don't really deal with that much in the Guard, but you're racked and stacked amongst your peers locally, even though they're not in your career field. So a lot of that is based on what have you done for me lately. And being that I was over in the AOR for a year, I didn't do nothing for them lately. So what I thought was going to help probably did not help promotion-wise. Experience through the roof. But I had a group commander or a group chief. When I got down there, I was down there 8 months, stratification comes up, and they only do the top 10% or top 20% for chief. And only being there 8 months, it's all records. They didn't know me from Adam, and I was number 8 of 9 that they stratted. They only did 9. I was number 8 of 9. No, I'm sorry. Got to get this right because Cat comes in here. So Cat was 8 of 9. I was 5 of 9. And so, again, being competitive, I'm 5 of 9. This is all records based. She's 8 of 9. We're there for a year. Within that year, I developed 3 new courses. She's the legal office superintendent, so she's doing great things. She wins the quarterly award as a senior NCO for the wing staff. I win a quarterly award for the group. Wash, right?
Yep.
The stratification board happens before the next year's promotion. And no, I'm sorry. See, I told you I screwed up. I was 8 of 9. She didn't get a strat. The next year, both win quarterly awards, both doing great things. Strat board happens. I go from number 8 of 9 to number 5. She goes from nothing to number 2.
To 2.
Oh. And I'm like, so I go to the group chief, and he's like, hey, I did the best I could, but, this is what you got. And he wasn't going to tell me what Cat got. And so, of course, I find out from her, and I'm like, hold on a minute. So I was 8 of 9. You got nothing. I win award. You win award. Check. I go to number 5, and you go from nothing to 2. How's that work? And when I asked him, I was like, so how does that work? And I'm not going to do it on here, but he motions to chesticles. Like, must be the, jokingly, but I'm like, it's got to be. So, studied my butt off like I did every year. And I told you earlier about, I wasn't a big reader. I was a guy who used to get study materials, and when I was in the car back and forth to McDill, anytime I was in the car for 4 months when I was by myself, that's all I listened to was the professional development guide. Nonstop. I used to sleep listening to it. And I always figured that you're probably going to be smarter than me, but my goal is to outwork you. And I was a repetition guy. I wanted to just... I didn't make tech sergeant at one point by a landslide, and I didn't study. And I said, you know what, I got to get off my tail. Like, this is all me. And I actually studied and ended up making it. And I realized, well, kind of, if you study, But I did know the difference because I had a lot of people in my career that said they studied, and what they meant was they come home and they open the book up and they set it open, and then they
Right.
watch TV for an hour. And
Right.
so I definitely knew the difference. But I always, from that point forward, I made master my first time, and I was always in the top 10% of scores when it comes to senior. But I didn't have a lot of time. I didn't have a lot of other things that wasn't on my side. But I always wanted to be is that if I didn't make it because of my test scores, it wasn't because of my effort.
Right.
And I was always big on that. And when I didn't make it, the year that Cat did make it, as I told you earlier, I missed it by less than one, and I still scored in the 80s, which in the 80s on those kind of tests is a big deal. But it wasn't like I rolled out of bed and just tested. It's months and months of preparation. And so again, that chief that was joking, that's one of the things that he's like, well, we gotta get you run like an organization, the top three you do, and I just said, hey, there's nothing, that's not me. Like, I don't have any spare time in my job. Like, I am fully committed. I'm seeing more people come through this course than any of our MAGCOMs are seeing. I have more influence in the career field by doing this kind of work than I would ever have running the top three golf tournament. And that's just not me. If I went and did that,
Right.
people would know I'm doing it for a bullet or knowing it. And I said, it doesn't interest me. And I and it, in some ways, if I would have done those things earlier, I more than likely would have got it promoted earlier. And in my stubborn ways, I was like, well, I'm not doing that. I'm going to stick to my guns and I'm going to get promoted. And my pea-brain thought process is I'm going to get promoted because I'm good at my job, or else I'll retire as a senior master sergeant. Mm-hmm. And I did. I stuck with that. I didn't do, I did what I needed to do as far as be involved, but I never, the first committee I was ever a part of was after I made chief. I became treasurer of the 8th Chief Group. It's the only committee I've ever been a part of. And that's not something that, like, my wife was doing that, but she enjoyed that kind of stuff, and she had the ability to do that. I was never in a job in any of my 12 assignments where I felt like I had extra time. Like, never. So doing something like that wasn't genuine to me, and I didn't want to, I was kind of a fight the system guy, is that if you're going to tell me I have to do that. I mean, when I got the assignment to Dover, active duty, the senior master sergeant positions are prioritized. So when you only have certain 70%, only the top 70% are going to get. So at the time when you have overseas returnees, if priority number 8 is open and priority number 28 is open, you know where you're going. And at that time, there was 47 senior master sergeant positions active duty, and DIAS was 47. Mm-hmm. You're not going to get promoted from that job. You're not going to get promoted from that job. And what we was able to do, I work with a couple other good instructors down there, and build those courses. The career field, we was calling that the center of excellence, and that career field ended up, the Chiefs group at that time, ended up changing that position to like the number 3 position in the career field, based on what we were able to do down there as far as create those courses for the development of the career field.
Right. I mean, that's where change comes and improvement comes, is from the lowest, and have it come up through from the bottom.
Yeah. And it was
educate, because you were huge on educating people, the mobility processes, the MEF pack, all that kind of stuff that people were learning. I just remember you being very knowledgeable on all that, and trying to make sure that the lowest common denominator understood the what and why. And I know that was just my impression of you when I was able to be around you.
Yeah, and I enjoyed, I enjoyed the instructor gig, because my wife got promoted. That cut our tour there short. She got promoted. We had to go, and they sent her off to Langley, and lo and behold, that's where we encountered again. As they at the time, I wasn't selected to go to the ACCIG team because of who I was. I was selected because I was married to somebody just made chief. Fortunately, I did have fighter experience. It had just been some time. Mm-hmm. But, at the time, the career field was going through trials and tribulations with inspections, accidents, and, so shortly after I got there, the Air Force created the first special interest item being our career field. So it didn't matter what type of inspection, these certain things were going to be looked at. And off I went. And that's kind of where I really established a relationship with Jeff, because he was the guard bureau chief. And most of our inspections were guard units. And I did, when I was at McDill, we had an ORI, and we did really well. And after that, one of the inspectors from the AMC IG team was going through the academy. So the AMC chief called me up and said, "Hey, you did very well in the last inspection. What do you think about coming up doing inspections for AMC for about 3 months during the summer while our instructors at school, or our inspectors at school?" So I had the previous augmentee inspector experience with AMC. So when I got that, inspections wasn't new. It was just doing CAF inspections. And first 4 or 5 out of the block were not good. And I learned very well how to deliver bad news. And, again, I very rarely was it ever personal. Sometimes I felt like it was personal because they knew we were coming, and they had things that could have been, if you need a letter and you do the letter in front of me, that's actually more irresponsible than just having a letter. Like if it only took you 2 minutes, then why didn't you, like we didn't have no notice at the time. Like you knew we were coming for like a year.
Yeah.
So, but it wasn't, again, there was a lot of things, and I took that as in, my relationship with you would not have prevented me from telling you that is garbage.
Right. It's business.
And that was because I looked at that as my own professional integrity. Like I can't give up everything I've worked for this long because you're cool, but you're not doing what you could do, because potentially what you're not doing could hurt the captain. And I would hate to have to tell the captain's wife that he's not coming home because you just didn't feel like doing that today. And that was, I looked at everything I did as my own professional integrity. And whether or not somebody wanted to hear it, I also looked at it as like the IG that I worked for, the general, was a pilot of mine at Aviano way back when I was a staff sergeant. He was a major.
Yeah.
And so because of that previous relationship, when we first started that special interest item, he had, "Hey, come on back." I had my branch chief saying, "Hey, why's the general having you in his office?" I was like, "He just wants to talk." But he was wanting to know, like, "Hey, what's really going on?" And there was tons of things that were going on that when and if that equipment would have been used would have been questionable. And that's, again, you said the word intimidating earlier, but it wasn't any easier as a master sergeant or a senior master sergeant going to a unit, inspecting a chief who'd been doing it for a hell of a lot longer, and being able to tell the chief, "Hey, you need to get your poop in the group here." Not in those words, but, "Hey, this is wrong and this is wrong." But it's not personal. It's the right thing to do, because we're both in it. If we're in it for the right reason, we're both making sure Captain Crunch is going to be safe.
Yep. And that's exactly why I started that AFAC class, was just to bring all the fighter people together and just really get into the weeds. And you can almost draw a line between a letter that you need on file and that equipment being done and done right, so that it would work in case there's an ejection or something. But it all has to be done. And I believe, and I think a lot of people will agree, that when life support merged with parachute shop in 2008, it was like a 3-phase process. We've described it in the past that we used to be rock stars, but then combining the two shops and everybody had to learn everything, it just really got difficult and hard with the having to requal or recertify different time frames. We went back and forth on that. And I just remember you describing one time that our like the number of pieces of equipment we worked on, or basically responsibilities, were like an inch
Inch wide and a mile deep.
and it was a mile deep on experience. And then when we went through these transitions, our responsibilities were a mile wide, and our
Our
experiences
technical capability was an inch
an
deep.
inch deep.
And that's the way I used to explain to leadership because I had that experience. I did, I don't know, 15, 16, 17, 18 inspections at ACC. And a lot of those were not good. And to the point where, I give Chief Sandlin some credit here. Shout out to Shane again. He was the ACC chief, and he was starting to get questioned of why I was being so hard on the units. And I said, well, you need to come with me to a couple. And he'll tell you, he's falling asleep, and Shane would think that's funny, but he's falling asleep in the work center because aircrew flight equipment was the first in and last out every day. Mm-hmm. And anybody that was out on the road with me knew that, like, to grade somebody as satisfactory took no work. I could have graded everybody to sat, and I could have went and ate at all the diners, drives, and dives, restaurants in every town we visited and all that kind of stuff. But to say somebody is marginal or to say somebody is excellent, it took a lot of work, And again, if I'm saying that and I'm the consistent I, it needs to be the same track record. It needs to be the same. And I'm like, look, this is me on the line. If I go out and I don't write something up, I used to explain it to everybody as a CTK composite toolkit has to have an etch number in it. If it didn't have a number in it, and I tell you that, hey, this doesn't have a number in it, and you go take and you get it to a senior airman and you say, hey, go etch this, and they come back and etched it, the only thing you proved is that the etcher works.
Yep.
But what about the process that you were supposed to look at that every day? Like, that's a process issue. That's not proving it. And, and so I looked at things like that, and Shane come out with me, and we got plenty of pictures. I used to tell everybody, man, if I could do a SAV report or inspection report with pictures, we do a hell of a lot less writing and a whole hell of a lot less reading. Because sometimes, when a picture says 1,000 words, it's easy that way. And he come out, and I'm like, so you see, I'm not making that up. That's on backwards.
Yep.
That's not there. So, and he got to see that, and that's where we put together some of those things to come up with that special interest item and get the folks to understand that this wasn't, I could have got a lot less write-ups on folks, but only if I didn't look. Yep. If I kept the same professional integrity, the only way I would get less write-ups is to not look. Once I see it, I can't, that's the whole purpose. Again, government was paying me to go out and do that. So, it was a tough time for me because I felt questioned for doing the right thing. But again, it's one of those things I stuck to my gun. I'm like, well, if I'm the one that's authoring this report and sending it to the general, and that dude, he actually did my chief promotion ceremony, was one of the best officers, General Seguin, that I had ever worked for. And having that prior established relationship, the trust that he had in me was also just something that I knew if there was any question that comes up. We had a unit that was supposed to go back to jumping. I go down there, and I found all kinds of problems. And immediately we call back to the general, and he's like, should they be jumping? I said, I wouldn't jump with one of those parachutes. They got all kinds of missing tools. They haven't updated their tech orders in over a year.
Bad thing's waiting to happen.
Not a thing, and he's like, I got it. Then we don't have them jump anymore until they get it right. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of the backing you need. That's really kind of all a senior NCO wants, is that leadership's going to get their back when they, and that's the thing that I wasn't willing to give up when it comes to my own, is that, hey, I'm not making this up, and most of the folks, and I did, I gravitated my experience with Jeff. Again, he's always been a wealth of knowledge, very personable, easy to talk to, and explaining some of those things. Never questioned my judgment, and most of the units were his units. And he's of the same mindset, is that, well, there's only one way to do it, and that's right. So if it's not right, fix it, kind of thing. And I met, there's probably a handful, probably more than a handful actually, of guard chiefs that I had met that that instant respect for the duration, the long doing it, the care. Nobody in active duty was creating that course to get everybody together, and in some ways a little bit envious of that guard family, whereas, we're constantly active duty, constantly moving, so I was always interested in learning what the 50 titles were and the difference between, especially because, active duty, we were creating those total force integration units, total force association units where, we're flying each other's airplanes and all that kind of stuff. So meeting you guys, the respect I had, you guys welcoming the active duty guy, I've been to, plenty of the guard workshops, out to your place, been to the hog house.
That next visit's long overdue.
Yes. So I've, I enjoyed that part, especially once I get up to the staff level, because I got to interact with you guys a lot more. And I used to tell folks when I was on the ACCIG team, and I told folks when I was on the staff, when I first got to AMC, the 06 that I work for, within 3 days brings me in his office and he says, "Hey Chief, just to let you know, all those problems you were having over in the CAF, we don't have those in the MAF." And I said, "Sir, if you think that's because all the people in the CAF are dumb and lazy, you've been misinformed. It's not a people problem. It's a career field process problem." I said, the overwhelming majority of people in the CAF that were having problems weren't having problems because they maliciously came to work and said, "I'm going to suck today." It's they were given 2 career fields worth of work and 1 career field worth of experience with no additional training. That's the issue. And
at the time too, on the guard side, we had to do the SEER instructor job as well.
Absolutely.
And do all that continuation training there.
And that was our thing, is that, we were pretty hard on ourselves, but I think that's out of passion for caring. You know what I mean? Like and being able to point out all those things were wrong. I think in a lot of ways, at least personally, having the ability to point out those things wrong was giving you advocacy to get it right. Yep. And that's how we explain things. I was the AMC chief for, I don't know, a little over 5 years, but all the times and all the things that we were consistently trying to educate leadership on, what is it about AIF? There's always something going on with AIF. And I'm like, well, that's, you took 2 career fields that were very specific technically for themselves, and you merged them and you shrunk the tech school by weeks.
Yeah.
So now you're do
the math.
You're packing parachutes, which is a very delicate, tedious, important job. And the overwhelming majority of people that are getting trained by somebody that was trained by somebody else that wasn't at tech school. You know what I mean? It's not, it's on-the-job training. It's not formal training. And then as we keep doing that, on the active duty side, I used to explain it as well, is that, you had somebody joins the Air Force and they get stationed at McConnell as an airman basic, and they work on KC-135s.
I did see one comic, and this is a comic, this is a joke, but on the internet it came across my feed once. There's this dad sitting on the step with his son talking about his military career. He says, "Yeah, sorry to say, son, but I killed a few people." And the kid says, "Dad, but you were a parachute packer." And he says, "Well, I didn't say I was a good one."
Yeah. Well, and that was the thing, you never knew, right?
Yeah.
But that's one of the things that, again, the difference between the CAF and MAF, where, it's kind of like a fire truck, right? You don't use it every day, but when you need it, it better be right. Well, that's the same thing, is that, I can't tell you when the next parachute is going to be used on a MAF aircraft, but I can tell you when the next opportunity does happen, the people who put it on hope it works.
Yep.
And their families hope it works. And when you, from the active duty side, if you're a guard guy, guard girl, and you're there at that unit and you merge career fields, besides the fact you're also doing SEER, but places like Key West and that kind of stuff, you're there for a long time. So the chances of that sticking happens a little bit more frequently because you're there for a long time. Whereas you get that person that comes in, like I said earlier, McConnell, they get a 1 year assignment to McConnell because they're brand new first term airmen and they want to go to Korea. And so they go to McConnell for a year and they kind of learn KC-135s, and then they get a remote to Kunsan where they work F-16s, but only for a year. So how much are you learning in a year, right? I mean, you're going to learn. You're not going to get hardly a whole lot of experience. And then you get a follow-on to Moody and you work rescue. So on paper, this person's been in 3 years, worked 3 different weapon systems.
I remember being in some of those meetings and, like I said, the Guard not having to deal with that, but the struggles that you guys had. And I think there was maybe some work on SEI, Special Event Identifiers, or something to try to get that consistency so that stuff didn't happen. And I just like, man, that's a big nut to crack with dealing with manpower, the shortages you talked about, even with your 365s where you're taking one guy off the manning document, but then dealing with that experience level. That was a big problem.
There was a lot of work that the career field did functionally to get after that, but in order for it to work, the big mystery machine Air Force Personnel Center had to play ball, and there was things that they were just not willing to do that would have helped things like those special experience identifiers actually have teeth and work, that they weren't willing to do assignments because it's all it's all about the money, and it's expensive to move people and to make them fit and the right things.
Yeah, special experience identifiers. Yeah, I said that wrong.
But those were things again that you would see. I would bring back from my experience being the AR guy, seeing a staff sergeant that was in charge of a C-130 unit that had been at that base for 8 months, and previously he worked A-10s or a rescue. And here the guy is deployed because he's the new guy. Everybody else there has already been worn out, been deploying constantly. And you would get in there and you would see that they really want to do the best they can. They just weren't provided the best setup, the best training, and all that kind of stuff. So, that was a big thing, and I think for me, career field wise, at the schoolhouse, having the reserve and guard students to be able to add the perspective that I didn't have, but wanted to know, because I realized that, this was an ACC course, but 75% of the students that went through that schoolhouse were not ACC. So shout out to Chief Martin Austin, who kind of let me develop those courses with the understanding that this is an ACC schoolhouse, but we were going to make this an Air Force course. Because previously it was really ACC centric, and they were, AMC units were spending a lot of money to send their people down there to learn the ACC supplement. Yep. It really didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. And, so we, thanks to him, we fixed it and we did the best we could.
And speaking of the ACC supplement, which is basically the additive to the main regulation to fit for fighter rescue world and stuff, that's as far as getting to know the active duty chiefs. And that's the thing that I really enjoyed, was being given the opportunity to give input. Because when the active duty was rewriting the regulations, the relationships that you talked about started growing, and we were given the opportunity at even a lower level to give input, and you guys listened on a lot of it. We didn't get everything we asked for. We also know that there's things where your world and our world were very different, and how do you put that in one document? But I really appreciate it. That's one of the things I love doing the most, because when you're a young airman and you're reading these regulations, there's always something you come across, and somebody says, "Oh, that's stupid," or "Why are we doing this and that?" To be able to have a hand in that, we really appreciated that, and I just want to let you know.
No, I again, based on that experience, when I was the AMC chief, we did the AMC supplement, and when I did that, I held an event, and I had Paul Mugley. I'm pretty sure it was Ken Simmons, and I might even think Dave Joachim came up, and we sit down in a room over at the education office with my staff for 3 days, and we went line by line on that supplement. Because, again, if we're all going to go to war together, we all need to be operating off the same sheet of music. And I figured that if we all sit in that room together and do that supplement together, when we officially have our leaderships approve it, there'll be 0 to no conflict. And with the help of my staff, which if anybody and everybody knows my staff, they knows they did all the work. Dennis Latito and Ted Angel, Mike Freeberry, all those guys. I think we got a supplement published in 6 months, which was kind of a record.
Oh, yeah.
If you know anything about getting anything published. But all that was based on that prior coordination, and also, the Guard and Reserves for that matter, being okay with, hey, this has got to be a total force guy. We can't say we're going to go to war together, but then we have our own stipulations and our own rules. And some of that was to actually help. If we don't have the same requirement, we can't get the same kind of money, or whatever. You know how that goes. But yeah, that's the same thing. That was a good thing. I think that's one of the things that we had a lot more conferences and workshops. The Aircrew Performance Working Group we had down at Robbins quite a bit. I got a peek behind the curtain. I got invited because I was at the schoolhouse. Chief Austin invited me as a senior master sergeant. It was the first time seeing a bunch of chiefs around a table argue with each other. Hadn't seen that before.
Yep.
Gotten kicked out of a room. I had been into the utilization training workshop where we developed basically what's going to be taught at tech school and all that kind of stuff. And I was sitting back at a table reserved for senior master sergeants. We weren't allowed to speak. We were just there in person. But I got to see a lot of that in the interaction, and I think some of that, whether it be good, bad, or indifferent, helped me figure out the ways to navigate to where we both get, not only what we want, but more importantly, most of the time, what we needed.
Yeah, Chief Snyder sent out the invite. I got to go to a few of those meetings as well, where you just sit back and listen. And, it's eye-opening.
Yeah, there's again, and I attribute any kind of success, whether perceived or not, to I moved around a lot. So I had 12 assignments. Cat beat me there too. She had 13. But 12 assignments in 30 years. And I was a repeat offender twice. So I was at Dover twice, and I was at Osan twice. But, from everything at Dover to a senior airman flight line worker bee to the superintendent. So at least got to experience those things. But I think all that is what helped me, at least in my own mind, think that I was successful as the AMC guy. I think we moved, I was proud of the work that we was able to do. And again, no secret, I had nothing but rock stars that worked with me the whole time. My whole 5 years. I had, there was, at some point, the active duty started doing the enlisted development teams. So basically the chiefs twice a year would look at records, and based on folks' experience, they would basically record whether they were good for a certain level of assignment. And like I told you, when Cat made chief and I went to the ACCIG team, it wasn't because of my experience. It was because I was married to another chief. 2 years after that, the Air Force finally looks at enlisted folks and says, well, why don't we do for our enlisted force like we do for our officers? And we specifically developed them to take on leadership positions. It's kind of like, voila. So we were one of the first career fields to do that. I think we were one of the first 5 or 6 to do that, where we sit down, and it was painful at first. There was 12 of us, 13, whatever chiefs. Got 220 master sergeant records, 10 years worth of records, and looked at them and decided whether or not they were good for a MAGCOM staff or whatever. But that painstaking process led to me having the staff that I had, because every one of them was on the staff because chiefs looked at their records and said, "Babe, based on their past performance, this looks like they would be good at a headquarters staff position."
I remember hearing a term vector. Was that,
That is
just
a vector.
generic team term,
Vector
or is
was,
that what
yeah.
you guys developed?
The
was
enlisted
vector?
development team did the vectors. So I don't know what it is today, but we had Vector 1, Vector 2, Vector 3. Vector 1 was a headquarters staff position. Vector 2 was like one of our acquisition positions or an instructor position. And a Vector 3 was, I don't really care for the term, but it was like a no-fail wing superintendent position. I don't believe we have any superintendent position that can fail.
Right.
But that's kind of what it was. And most of that was based off of responsibility. You know, if you have multi-weapon system, or, you know, some career fields, once you get 60 people, you're authorized the chief. Well, we had at one time, I think the Little Rock's superintendent position was a senior master sergeant, and they had, 70 some people. That's bigger than some squadrons.
Right.
So we wanted to make sure, and again, that was a program that was relying on the Mystery Machine Air Force Personnel Center actually doing it. And this one, because it was a Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force initiative to have all career fields do vectoring, because it was kind of forceful enlisted development, that was one that they got on board with. And, we coded all the staff positions to require this vector. And then when we did that board, we assigned those vectors to those people in their records. So when a position come open, on one of those vector positions come open, when they apply to go to that position, if they didn't have the right vector, they weren't considered.
So there was immediate effect with that project, which is tough to do in the military, to have immediate effect.
Yep. But it was very, I'm sure it's changed, but it was, again, and it didn't always work in everybody's favors. There was people out there that you would potentially want, but the vote didn't go that way. And a lot of times there was chiefs that was, that we had plenty of closed door conversations that became personal conversations about a professional reason. And some of that was, well, that's a good dude. And that's a, she's a great master sergeant. And there were those of us that was not saying he isn't, not saying she's not, but being in for 15 years and having one assignment in the MAF doesn't make it that I think she would be great on the ACC staff. Mm-hmm. That's the whole process of this. It's not because, well, if they don't get a vector, it's going to hurt them. Then have them PCS. It's not going to hurt. It's not a promotion thing. We're not looking at the records. We happen to be looking at the same thing that the promotion board looks at, but we're deliberately looking to put people based on their experience. I don't, I got an argument with our command chief here at AMC because she was saying that our people that were working for me on the staff should now go be a first sergeant. And I'm like, well, they were brought here specifically to be developed in their career field. The Air Force PCS them to here specifically to do a minimum 3-year control tour. This person's been here a year, and you're saying that he should go be a first sergeant. I understand your need for first sergeant, but the Air Force has already made that decision when they sent him here for 3 years. And I'm like, besides, the career field's plan is to bring him here, have him here for 3 years, take that AMC staff experience, and then go back to a larger wing. And now you got kind of a debt to the command working at a wing. Mm-hmm. Well, but they're going to get all kinds of experience as a first sergeant. I'm like,
she's not familiar with our career field then.
Not functional experience. No. You doing LORs may be helpful for 20%, but I'm telling you, if you got to figure out how to write a 1067 to get a new piece of equipment or to get a better piece of equipment, or how to write a form to change the tech order, 3 years of being a first sergeant is not going to help you there.
Nope. So that's where you spent the last part of your career as 5 years as AMC chief.
As the AMC chief, yep. I got there in July, August, September of 14, and I retired in July of 19.
Nice.
Yep.
So transition into the civilian side? What kind of time frame was between you and Kat when you each retired, and what was it like transitioning
So,
into civilian world?
it's one of those things, I joke, and everybody that's been through it knows, when you retire, you start, I did 30 years, so I couldn't do any more unless I got congressional approval. Congress didn't care about, Griffith was healthy. Nobody wasn't going to ask, right? I would have stayed, but it wasn't going to do it. But you also start thinking about, man, the Air Force is going through changes. Like, it's time for me to go. And I think it's easier to say that because at 30 years you have no choice, right? But there was probably decisions back when I was in for 22 that the Air Force was making, and I was like, well, that's ridiculous. I could have chose to go, but I chose to stay. Therefore, salute smartly and get on board, But when you get to that point where you have to go, it's a hell of a lot easier to say, oh, this is dumb. I can't believe the Air Force is going to allow you to have hands in your pockets. I'm out.
Yeah.
And that's a joke. But so I was on the verge of, I thought I was going to have a hard time retiring. I had a lot of passion for what I did. So I thought I was going to have a hard time with retiring. And one of the things I thought I was going to have a hard time with is that I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I know more of what I didn't want to do versus what I did want to do. And I enjoyed being an instructor. I enjoyed doing inspections. And I did fairly well. I was fairly organized at program management. So there was kind of 3 areas. I was like, you know what, I could do this. I ended up meeting a guy that works across from Boeing at DCMI, so defense contractor, basically inspect everything that's made for the government. And I happened to meet him at a social, they called it a reverse social, where networking, where instead of you going down, it's kind of like before my time, but speed dating. So, it was a transition thing where you go sit at a table with 2 or 3 other people that's getting ready to retire. And then every 10 minutes, representatives from local businesses would come and sit down, and you would speed date looking for a job.
Right.
And I just went, and I happened, the first guy I sit down with, I'm in uniform because the base gate closed. I didn't get to go home and change. So I'm in uniform, and this guy looks at me and he says, well, so Chief, what do you want to do? And I said, I know what I'm going to do right now is tell you not the right thing to say. And what I'm going to tell you is, I don't know. I just know what I don't want to do. I said, everything I've learned in this TAP class, transition assistance program, was to not say that, but I'm just telling you, I don't know. And I said, I really enjoyed being an instructor. I said, so something training interests me. I said, I really enjoyed the quality assurance inspector. I was an inspector. And I think I might enjoy program management, but it probably would depend on what kind of program. And he ripped out a business card, and he's like, well, hey, he was a supervisor of quality assurance over at DCMA. So we started talking, and how long have you been working there? How long? He's like, yeah, I've retired. I was a chief out at the St. Louis Guard. I was like, oh, really?
Really?
I said, you know Jeff Schneider? He said, well, absolutely. And, we had a conversation, and I just said, it sounds great, but I'm not interested in that drive over there.
Yeah.
And that was one of the things is that I really, what I knew I didn't want to do is that at the time, Cody was 7 years old. I was gone, by the time he was 4, we had lived in 3 places. The time that, on the ACCIG team, I was there for 17 or 18 months. I think I was gone for 170 days. Cat traveled a lot, and I just wanted to be available. I didn't want to do, and St. Louis is only 12 miles from here, but that drive, depending on what, 3:30 or 4, is longer than 12 miles.
It's not miles, it's minutes, hours.
And so I just said, I don't want to do, and I just put the feelers out, and long story short, I got picked up to work in the command readiness office as a program analyst. And if anybody knows what DERS is, Defense Readiness Reporting System. I am in that all day, every day, pulling reports, making slideshows for folks, for briefings. And it's nice because I'm still in operations, so I use all that operations experience I had for 30 years. I still work with a lot of people on the staff that I used to, so I didn't have to learn a whole new set of people.
It's like
And
your
that's
T-shirt. I'm with the government,
I'm
here to help.
I'm with the government. I'm here to help. And that's so it's been nice. It's a job. I enjoy it. I do understand the difference between the way of life of the Air Force and it being a job. So again, I think that was one of the things that helped me. I got the offer in September, did a little negotiation. I didn't start for 4 months. So I got to the point, I went through what I would think a lot of the retirees go through, and you could say whether this is true for you or not, but I retired, and I retired ceremony on Friday. My son went out to visit his aunt and uncle and kids for 3 weeks on Sunday. Actually, when she was here for retirement, she left, took him with her, and then Cat went TDY on Monday. So the first Monday after retirement, I'm at the house going, what's going to happen?
Man.
But, I didn't shave or cut my hair for 3 weeks out of protest, and that's about all longer I could deal with that. But I went through about 6 weeks of honey-do lists, and I was kind of like, all right, at some point I should probably start adulting again. Started running out of projects, and all my projects and hobbies are expensive, so I was like, maybe I should really do something. So, like I said, I got a month after I retired, Kat had her ceremony. She did a Skills Bridge internship with the Department of Justice.
So you're pretty close in time frame then.
We were 6 months. So I had my ceremony in July. My official retirement date was 30 September. So first day of retirement was 1 October. Her last day on active duty was 28 February. So first day of retirement. But because she did a 60-day internship with Skills Bridge working for the Department of Justice, she had her retirement ceremony moved up so she could do that and then still take all of her leave. And she was the same way. She was a little different where she wanted to do something away from the military, but she still kind of wanted to serve. So through her Skills Bridge, they offered her a job at the Department of Justice, but she also seen a job working for the Veterans Administration, and she gravitated towards that, and she applied and got that job. And fortunately for us, she got hired. 95% of the time is working from home. She got hired in April 20, right in the middle of COVID.
Yep.
Jefferson Barracks is where her technical office is. She went down to Jefferson Barracks, picked up an ID card in the morning, picked up her computer in the morning, and was up running on email this afternoon. Wouldn't happen in the Air Force.
Nope.
I retired with a clearance. I started working in January and didn't get my badge to get in the building until March.
Oh, my word.
So every day, let me in the building. If I had to go to the bathroom, I had to be escorted. And I was hired to work in a classified environment, and I couldn't do anything that they hired me for 2 months, in which I had an active clearance when I retired. So, she did that. It was perfect because of COVID. School's on, school's off. Because of what I do, I didn't have the ability to work from home. So not having Cody to worry about with COVID, school's closing because she was working from home. That was perfect timing. Grateful for that. But yeah. So we both, what we were told in transition class is that typically your first job will not be your final job. Both of us are now 4 years into the civilian gigs, and she just took a promotion. Crazy. She's a supervisor. After 30 years, that's one of the things I said I wasn't going to do, and I'm still holding tight to that. But yeah, both. I mean, I can't complain. Still enjoying it. I still play the lottery, hoping that I can not work, but I haven't been successful that either. But
You mentioned hobbies. Let's roll into that a little bit.
yeah, I got several. Photography is one that I enjoy. We often joke. My son is probably the most photographed kid. I can't imagine how many photographs I got him.
Your first trip to Yellowstone was how many
I
photos?
took 6,000 pictures the first time I went to Yellowstone.
6,000
Yeah,
pictures.
I've been
There you
back.
go.
I've been back 4 or 5 times. I haven't taken as many.
How many of the eclipse last week?
I had 3 different cameras and 2 GoPros going, so a couple hundred probably.
Yeah.
I haven't even looked at all of them yet. But yeah, I enjoy that. You know, I've actually joked because my mom was a big photography person. One of the things I'm grateful for is that when I went on that 365, Cat's mom, who's actually here visiting, she came and stayed with Cat for about 4 months. And my mother and all the pictures that I had, the old days where you'd go get, the 4x6 developed, got to get doubles.
Mm-hmm.
And my mother had those old picture albums that had the plastic clear, I don't know what you call it, material.
Yeah.
They would stick over the pictures. My mom gave me somewhere close to 20 of those. And I bought a really nice scanner. And when I deployed, my mother-in-law took all of those pictures out of those binders and she scanned over 6,000 pictures.
Wow. That's pretty cool.
So fortunately, I have all those digital. So I've spent a lot of time trying to organize those. Some of those were organized in the drive we talked about earlier that I lost. I didn't lose the pictures. I just lost the organization of those. But yeah, so I've always had that. When my mom was sick, I went back. I found more. When she passed, I actually found even more. Actually, my Uncle Dave gave my sister 16 millimeter film about a year ago, probably 30 of them. I sent them off to a company to digitize. I got videos of me when I was 5 I'd never seen
Really?
before.
That is sweet.
I just did that about 8 months ago. So right now they're on a system that I can send. I sent my sisters the link. They've seen videos of them that they hadn't seen before. I've seen a lot of pictures of other relatives. So I got all those digitized. I'm going to put them on thumb drives and giving it to my mom was one of 11. There's only one left. But having that kind of stuff. So I've always, I always used to see my mom with pictures, So I got into, I took actually my coin that I made as a chief has a picture. It's kind of what's on my tattoo as well. That was my 30-year gift to myself.
The whole works?
Yeah, the whole.
Because you mentioned your 30-year tattoo. And
Yeah, because,
ask at
legally
the
you
time
weren't
if
allowed
that
to have
was
sleeves when,
just
so when I retired.
Yeah, there you go.
But it's got state of Texas. People ask me all the time, were you born in Texas? No, but my son was, my wife was. I went to basic training there. I was at Abilene where we decided to have my son. So Texas, and there's no state more proud of themselves than Texas. So I've always, and I love Whataburger. So shout out to Whataburger. He's come to St. Louis.
Yeah, I've got a friend that talks about Texas people and the pride that they have in it. So whenever he meets one, he goes, "Is that near Oklahoma?"
Yeah, the girl I work with just come back from the NCO Academy at Shepherd, and she comes in and she says, "Mr. Wiley, I was not impressed with Whataburger." And I said, "Are you kidding me?" I wasn't. I said, "Well, hold on, that hurts. What'd you have?" "Chicken tenders." I said, "Get out."
It's not even in the title.
It's not called What a Chicken. It's called What a Burger. You can't go to Whataburger and complain about Whataburger when you had chicken tenders.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I have that. This picture is actually me in the back of an F-16 with a 35 millimeter camera on my first backseat ride in the F-16 at
Nice.
Aviano, about 5,000 feet over Venice, inverted like Tom Cruise. And, I wouldn't give anybody the bird, but that was before selfies were cool, right? Because it
Right.
was 35 millimeter. And then on the visor of the pilot is KC-135 refueling a B-1. Johnny Lott, who was instructor,
Yeah.
he drew that. He's a big draw. So he did the 25th anniversary for the B-1, and that's what he drew on the pilot of the B-1. So I asked him if I could use that, and he granted me permission to use that. I got my dates from I joined. I have the coordinates of Happy Teriyaki, where Kat and I went on our first date. I got the POW dog tag from my trip to Vietnam. That is not the Pepsi symbol. So I had a nurse, my hospital visit I told you about earlier.
Yeah.
I had a nurse ask me if that was the Pepsi symbol, and the doctor said I've never been so embarrassed. South Korean flag, because obviously that's where I met Korea. There's a picture of Kat as a chief, and in the background is the flag, Cutter flag, because that's where we decided to have Cody.
That is cool.
And I ran out of my buddy that I went to school with, Eddie Hallett, did this back in Maryland, and I did it all in one day.
I was going to ask
10
you
and a
how
half
long.
hours. Yeah. No, sorry.
Wow.
I did it in 2 days because he ran out of the Qatari flag ink, so he had to drive and get it the next day. So I did about 8 hours in one day with a 4-hour break. I mean, with a 20-minute break to eat pizza, 8 hours, and then I come back the next day, and he did another hour and a half.
Wow.
And I don't recommend that.
I was going to ask you about, pain level on that, or how would you describe getting that done? And was there much aftercare?
Yeah, I mean, anybody's got any tattoos, it's not pleasant. It doesn't, some people say after you do it for a while, it kind of gets numb, and no, it doesn't kind of get numb for me. It sucks, but it's one of those things, right? Once it gets started, you can't do half.
Right.
Like, so it kind of is what it is. Now, doing it all in one day, it's got its pluses and, minuses. Obviously, the minus was when you're sitting there for hours, like, it's just not fun. But it was something I wanted to do. I struggled with what I had, probably 7 more pictures that I want to include, but I don't have more arms. I was going to get the other arm done. But I have a lot of, I forget what the technical term is, but my mom gave me some hereditary skin things that I've also had, because as kids, we didn't do sunblock and all that stuff. So I had a lot of precancerous spots that actually has nicked up the tattoo, where they had to freeze some spots off. And then I'm like, I'm over 50. I probably don't need any more tattoos. But yeah, it was something I wanted to do. I was retiring, I was illegal, and I wanted it to be meaningful to me and my career. So that's what I come up with. And I had all these individual pictures, and I sent them to the dude that did it, and he come up with kind of the layout and blending them together and stuff, and did a really good job.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
When I was looking at that earlier today, I wondered, I wouldn't have guessed it was all done in one day.
Yeah, and I wouldn't advise it. But going back the next day for an hour and a half was even worse, because at this point it was swollen, and I'm like, I do not want to get back in that chair.
Didn't sleep well that night, did you?
No. Nope. But yeah, that was my gift to myself, and I didn't have to worry about any uniform violations or haircuts or.
Does Ted Angel have any tattoos?
Ted Angel is full up now.
Is he?
He is. He's got quite a few.
We'll talk about Ted and what you guys do.
Yeah. So Ted and I
think I met him one time.
Yep.
Maybe.
Ted is a brother from another mother. First met Ted. They had hired him to be on the staff before I got there. I would love to say I had a part in that, but that was all Mike Freeberry. When I got here, he was in a joint NCO, but immediately, anybody that knows Ted, he's a good dude, hard worker, just all around good dude.
Another retired chief.
Yep. So as I've had 3 knee surgeries, so I would typically only run about a month before the PT test, and I would score high enough to where I didn't have to test again for another year. because my right knee was not always the best. And they have called the Madison County Trail System. So there's about 120 some miles of bike trails. And I had a bike. My 2 tours in Korea, I wasn't authorized to have a vehicle, so that's how I got back and forth to work every day, was a bicycle. And so we started riding on the bike trails here, and we were doing it as a shop kind of thing. And he was on a trip somewhere at TDY, and he found, the magazines that's in the airplane. And he said, hey, man, they got this bike ride. It's called the Bicycle Across Missouri, where you go from one side of Missouri to the other side of Missouri, and it's an organized ride. They have an 18-wheeler that's rigged up as a shower, and you have a charging station, and they have a band or 2 every night with a beer tent and food trucks, and and I was like, dude, that sounds pretty cool. So we decided to do it, but in order to do it, the first one, I can't honestly remember. I have a sheet that I've kept all the stats. So when Ted retired 2 years ago, I made him a book from Shutterfly, and the first 10 pages were pictures of him and I on trips and military stuff. And then the last 50 pages were all of our years of bike rides. Mm-hmm. But we in order to do something like that, you don't just get on a bike and ride 50, 60 miles a day, bicycle that is, for 5-6 consecutive days without doing some prep. So putting it on the schedule, saying we're going to do this Bicycle Across Missouri thing, also required us to ride a little more during the week. So gave us incentive to ride and all that kind of stuff. So we ended up doing an organized bike ride and disconnected. Didn't have to worry about being on a cell phone, no email. And just, it was, first year we did it, there was probably 750 riders. So it's with a group, living out of a tent, and we had a blast. So we said, all right, next year we're going to do it, Bicycle Across Missouri. And they went a different route. The first year we started at St. Joe's, and we ended up in Hannibal, Missouri, home of Mark Twain. And I saw all kinds of crazy little towns, the home of sliced bread, and you wouldn't believe the things you can see in small towns, Missouri. So fast forward, we end up doing 4 Bicycle Across Missouri, 4 years in a row. And we've been across the state of Missouri every which way you can possibly go across the state. So that 5th year, we were like, all right, we're going to do something different. And our plan was they have a ride that goes across the west coast of Michigan. And COVID happened. And so we were like, what are we going to do? And Ted had since then made chief, and he was our acquisition chief up at Right Pat in Dayton, Ohio. So he called me up and said, hey, man, he said, we got this Miami to Ohio Valley Trail up here that goes from Cincinnati to Cleveland. What do you think about doing that? And I was like, well, it sounds cool. He's like, yeah, man, it's almost 80% on a bike trail. The only thing is, it's not an organized ride, so we'd have to configure our bikes to carry everything that on those last 4 years they carry for you.
Right.
And I'm like, well, we won't be able to do tents because our bikes are, at the time I had a racing bike. And I was like, well, it's not, we're not going to be able to carry tents. And he's like, we'll have to do hotels. So again, long story short, we got rooms during COVID, and I think the first year we did that through Ohio, we paid $250 total for the 5 hotel rooms, which was actually cheaper than the entry fee. And then it was him and I, so we didn't have to worry about any other people. Mm-hmm. And they're just rides. So now we didn't have a band or listen to, but we just went to a restaurant, had a beer. It was during June, or I think we did that first one in August or something. But baseball was on, so we had a blast. We went from Cincinnati to Cleveland, and that was such a great ride that the next year we decided to do the same thing, just start in Cleveland and end in Cincinnati. Mm-hmm. So we're like, all right, now we got Ohio tackled twice. Now what's next? And then so the next year we did the Katy Trail, which goes from Kansas City. So Ted came over here from Wright Pat, my wife and son, graciously drove us over to Kansas City. There's a Whataburger in Kansas City, so we ate at Whataburger in Kansas City.
Didn't have chicken.
Got a fuel for the ride, didn't have the chicken. And we drove, or we went to the Kansas City Royal game that Friday night, and then get up in the morning, and Ted and I headed off on what they call the Rock Island Trail. So it goes from Kansas City, meets up with the Katy Trail, and then another 200 and some miles across. And we ended in Machins, Missouri, which is just north of St. Louis.
Rock Island, was that the name of an old railroad?
Yeah,
Rock
I
Island.
think so, because it's a rail. I'm pretty sure it's a rail trail. So
there's a lot
they're
of
doing
those
a lot of
across
those.
the U.S.
Yeah.
because they'll only slope so much.
Yeah.
because
Well, that's
it was for trains and stuff.
yes, because Missouri on the Big Bam, Illinois is flat as day old bread. So I do a lot of riding around here, and it's flat. And then I go to Illinois, and that one Monday, Ted would tell you was here. We did 88 miles, and it was probably 98 degrees, and we climbed over like 3,500 feet.
Mhm.
And weren't used to riding that here. But that Katy Trail, beautiful, the whole way on a crushed gravel, so it's a little bit different riding the road. So since then, we both bought gravel bikes, so we weren't riding racing bikes on gravel. So we bought gravel bikes, and great ride. And we're like, all right, well, that's nice. What's next? And so last year, we fortunately, his wife Adina, shout out to Adina, drove us to Buffalo, New York, and we get up in the morning and we rode across the border and started in Canada at Niagara Falls. First international ride.
Mhm.
So we started in Niagara Falls in Canada, drove back across the border, and we finished in the east coast of Albany, New York. So we rode across the state of New York.
Oh, nice.
So that was 383 miles. So I got the stats. Like I said, I put those together. How many hours we've spent on the bike, how many 1,000 calories, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, so we've done 8 this year. Is our planned 9th trip, and right now our preliminary plan is to go on the Allegheny Gap Trail that starts in Pittsburgh, and it connects with the C&O Canal in Maryland and ends up in Washington, D.C.
That'll be cool.
So again, it's fun, not connected. Him and I just hanging out, talking about whatever it is, life in general. He's now retired, got a great job, talking about just life in general, seeing all kinds of stupid things, relaxing at night, having a beer, beverage, whatever. The last 2 years, we've stopped and saw some minor league baseball game by luck. And it also gives us something to put on the calendar and making sure you get on the bike and ride periodically. Because there's only so much what we call butt butter that you can use, that you have to prepare the butt somehow. And the only way you do that is to put your butt in the seat.
Mm-hmm.
But, I bought Cat a bike 3 years ago. So we usually do the pedal for autism every August. So Cody does that. I think it's 7. Cody did like 15 miles with me. So he's done the pedal for autism a couple times. That's 26 miles.
Mm-hmm.
But the trail system here is, you ain't got to worry about traffic or nothing like that. So
Right.
that's probably the other one. Cody's heavy in the baseball. So last year I was just a dad. I coached a rec ball team, and I was just a dad for his travel ball team. This year I've joined the coaching ranks of his travel ball team. So next week, we had our first tournament about 3 weeks ago. Next week starts the summer travel ball. Game on Monday, practice on Tuesday, game on Wednesday, tournament then weekend. So my hobbies take a back seat, but it's for good reason.
Yeah.
But he loves it. He loves baseball. He's got pretty good memory. He can tell you player stats. It's nice now that he's getting to that age where him and I can go to a game, and sometimes I'm just like wowed by the adult conversations I'm having with my 12-year-old. soon to be 13 who tells you he's almost 15. But yeah, that's probably it. Photography and the bike riding, and of course, I mean, I love sports. So anytime there's any kind of big sports on, I'm always just interested in sports. I think that's about it.
Yeah. We've been going for a little while. This has been a lot of fun.
Oh.
But was there anything more about your military career you want to mention?
No, just again, I wouldn't, probably wouldn't change anything if I could, because it would possibly turn out. I don't think it could turn out any better than what I had it.
Mm-hmm.
I was very fortunate. Fortunate, number one, that the Air Force allowed us to continue our assignments together and still be parents, but still continue to serve to where we both did. Mm-hmm. We both did 30. Kind of first and foremost. The other is the ability to and I don't tell Kat this very often, but I don't know if I ever told her, but having Cody later was great because I didn't have a whole lot of patience. So any patience I do have now, a lot of it is attributed to him. But had I had him 10 years earlier, I probably would have had more. We talked about having one, right? But everybody that I know that's got two typically says, well, if I'd have had my second child first, I wouldn't have to. So I wasn't willing to roll the dice.
Yeah, and it was good having your child a little later, because I think probably made it a little easier to navigate through the Air Force and the Joint Spouse Program. Although you did do 30 years instead of 20,
yeah.
So it probably levels off.
That helped, but what I miss by that, and I don't miss it because I never experienced, is that by the time I retired, he was only 7 years old.
Yep.
So he doesn't know kind of the sacrifice that we all know that's worn uniform. He doesn't appreciate, understand that. It's not that he doesn't appreciate, he doesn't know what it is. He doesn't know, I think he still thinks money grows in trees.
Yeah.
But he doesn't know kind of it's kind of like, I was actually having this conversation with him, is that, I had no idea what my parents went through to where I was old enough to understand what responsibility was, and realize that the things that I had in my life, I didn't grow up with any money. I talked about college. If I went to college, I'd had to pay for it myself. And I didn't really understand or appreciate, I always go back, I'm a big Christmas guy. Love Christmas. My mom, although she's passed, would tell you that she hated Christmas. But for somebody that didn't have a lot of money, I never felt like I went without. Mm. And you don't know that you don't at least realize that until you're old enough to appreciate their responsibility. And that's kind of the things that, that's that fine line with having a kid is, I want to give you more than I had, which at times is not difficult, but also at least have him appreciate what he does have, because to realize it doesn't just happen.
Right.
There was a lot of sacrifices that, when it comes to family, Kat and I live out here. None of our family lives out here in Illinois. So the only way Grandma comes and babysits when Cody's 10 is if she flies in to do that. I can't drop him off at anywhere, So
Right.
That sacrifice of not having that, and, we didn't choose to move to the locations, where they're at, not because we didn't want to, but we were set up to where we both, as we talked about, we're probably going to work, and where we were at, getting a job where you're at is probably better. And, Illinois is pretty, I'm a little disgruntled right now, but Illinois is pretty good with military as far as the benefits and stuff. But having the ability to move that, that's one of the things that, not for Kat, it wasn't a big deal. Like she said, when we were here, we got here in 14. So by the time we were here in 19 or 2020, that's the longest she's lived anywhere in her life.
Yeah. It was pretty amazing what she was talking about, and being as satisfied as she was for high schools
Yeah.
in high school.
Yeah. And finishing off high school with only 8 months,
Yeah.
7 months in that school.
Yeah.
And
That's pretty
whereas
special.
my experience is that, you know, she talked about I go back to my hometown, you know, I go to the mall, and typically I'll see at least one person that I knew from back then because I lived there for 18 years. But she don't understand that hometown concept. She understands the concept, she just
Yeah.
never lived it. So her moving around also, I think, made her a little bit more independent, which is one of the things that I think I liked about that, is that I didn't have to, you know, when I was going TDY, I didn't have to worry about, is she going to make it? And as being a spouse of a military member who went TDY, who was the one left at home, I also get the experience that, you know, after she's gone for 2 weeks is when something goes wrong, you know. So I can tell you, and she would tell you the same thing, it's a hell of a lot easier to be the one that's deployed than the one stuck at home.
Yes. Yes.
And I got
That's
the
why they
experience
give
that.
spouses the certificates on retirement
Absolutely.
time, you know.
Yeah, when she deployed in 2006, we were moving to Tampa. I had to sell our house in Delaware and go down to Florida and buy a house while she was deployed.
Yep.
So buy a house for your wife that she hasn't seen.
Uh-huh.
So I got a pool because I figured if I got a house with a pool, I couldn't go wrong.
There you go.
But that's, you know, yeah, but I that's one of the things that, you know, by having a kid late, I don't, you know, he didn't get to see, you know, he says he remembers, he led everybody in the Pledge of Allegiance at my retirement,
Oh, nice.
you know. Unfortunately, I got that stuff on video, but he doesn't, because of his age, he just didn't get to know that, whereas somebody that would be in for longer and the kids are older, they get a little bit more of the experience. And not necessarily moving around. Like I said, Kat and I ended up with the 2 different childhoods as far as moving. You know, I went to school. My mom worked in a pharmacy. She wasn't a pharmacist, but she worked in a pharmacy and she knew all the teachers. So I could come home from school and she'd be like, "So what happened to school today?" And I would tell myself, she may not have never even seen a teacher, but because I know the teachers have seen her before, I was like, "Yeah, I got caught chewing gum in Mr. Grove's class." But we had, you know, again, 2 different experiences get to the same place. But yeah, other than that, man, I say thanks to you for coming out, making the stop. You know, it's been fun.
Yeah. Yeah. And we delayed the filming to be able to have a little more time with Kat, and that gave us more time to talk during the day. Took a few photos we'll put up on here, and the stuff that you're talking about with your son, you know, being as young as he is, that's why I like doing this, you know, because he's going to be able to see what his folks, hear a little bit more about what his folks did in the military and all, and so yeah, it's been a fun day.
Yeah, it's been fun, man. Again, thanks. I appreciate you taking the time and coming out. And I didn't even get to feed you. I was trying to make you pizza tonight, and timing and
Yeah, we also talked
life
about
goes
how I
on.
don't need much pizza. you
Well,
know.
I don't. I typically don't eat either. I had special occasions, but I would consider this a special occasion. So again, thanks
I
for.
appreciate that. And someday Cody will probably have kids. So when Cody's grandkids are sitting right there, what would you want to tell them right now? If they get to see this, which is the purpose.
You know, he's too young to think about that. Number one.
Yeah.
I really don't know. Other than, you know, one of the things I tell Cody, one of the things if his kids were sitting there was that hopefully your dad listened. And I said, the harder you work earlier in life, the more fun you'll be able to have later in life.
Yep.
And, you know, I will tell you that one of the things that I don't talk to my son about very often is school. Because I don't need to.
Mm-hmm.
He's been in honor society and clearly from the mother side. He's a good kid. He's got a good friend that is good in school. And I think they're competitive with each other. And that's one of the things, again, you and I both know that, you know, you typically are successful as the people you hang out with. And that's one of the things that I've tried to instill in him is that, you know, if the people you're hanging around aren't at least or more successful than you want to be, you probably need to find different friends.
That's great advice.
And that's where, you know, Unlike me, I asked him a couple weeks ago, how many kids you want? Immediately, he's like 3.
Like he's thought about it already.
And I said, well, I'm here to tell you, you're going to have to work hard because kids ain't free.
Yep.
We joked riding around the neighborhood, and he's like, Dad, I think when I get on, I think I'm going to stay here and live in Illinois. And I was like, well, tell you what, you do yourself some good work in school, whatever you're going to do, make a good living. I'll make you a deal on the house. Mom and I will move into the basement of that house. And he's like, well, would you give me a good deal? I said, I'll give you the best deal that I can afford at the time.
There you go.
But I said, the house is big enough that you can go ahead with your wife and 1, 2, whatever you're going to have kids, you can go ahead and move upstairs, and Mom and I will take the whole basement, and we'll be just fine.
There you go. Perfect. Well, he's getting a heck of a good start.
I hope so.
It's a testament to you too.
Well, thanks again, man.
All right. Thanks for doing this.
Appreciate it, Jimbo.
It's a great day.
Yes, sir.
All right. Thanks for watching.
Yeah, man, I really appreciate it, and hopefully it didn't go too long for you.
No, not at all. But the total time around here was 3 hours and 8 minutes.
Wow.
So with editing
Doesn't seem that
and
long.
stuff. Yeah, see, that's what I was saying with the, was it she asked me? Yeah.
You said 90 to
90
3
minutes to 3 hours, and she seemed surprised, but I was like, you get talking, and
Yeah, well,
you
hopefully
can
it
do
was
90 minutes real
hopefully it
quick.
was good. It seems pretty natural to me.
Yeah.
But no, it's fun, man. I appreciate it.